Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. As is our custom, I'm going to go around the board members, have everyone introduce themselves. And do we have anybody? Farzana's online. So I'll start with Mary Ann.
Good morning, Marianne Stewart, Lexington.
Good morning, Dolly DeHasha, Worcester.
Erica Fisher, Worcester.
Matt Hills, Newton.
Catherine Craven, Brookline.
Pedro Martinez, Commissioner.
Steve Zreik, Andover.
Marty West from Newton.
Isabella Chamberlain, Hudson.
Christina Grant, Cambridge.
Kristen Smitty, Westfield.
Thank you. Now we'll start with public comment. And the first person to call up, actually it's two, Charlie Gallo, the compliance officer of the Lynn Public Schools, and Guillermo Sinelli, manager of translations and interpreting Lynn Public Schools, on the proposed new regulations for interpretation and translation services in schools. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning, Madam Chairperson, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the board, Secretary, and Commissioner. My name is Charlie Gallo. I'm the compliance officer for the Lynn Public Schools, which is the fourth largest school district in Massachusetts by student population. For the record, I'm also a public school parent here in the Commonwealth. The Lynn Public Schools Compliance Department focuses much of its work already in the areas of quality document translation and quality oral interpreting, already in general alignment with most of the proposed new regulation. Even with the recent revisions, however, the proposed final regulation before you today unfortunately includes one potentially catastrophic undefined provision, which is 57.053, which still says in relevant part, machine translation may be used to translate a document so long as the translation is reviewed and edited as needed by a school translator before the document is provided to a parent or legal guardian. Machine translation is not defined, unfortunately, but if that is taken to mean that every single document that is computer generated or computer assisted must first be human reviewed, it will result in increased costs. In Lynn, it will be about $4 million to implement that provision in that way. In addition, it will result in a significant slowdown of translation services for families, which will trickle down into a slowdown in noncompliance in the area of special education timelines. I'm here to respectfully ask that you do one of the following: strike in its entirety 57.053 and allow the department flexibility to offer guidance to keep up with technology from time to time. Maybe that's guidance around spot checking or approved vendors and technologies, but something flexible that the department could do. Or amend 57.053 to say something like the following: machine translation may be used to translate a document in alignment with guidance from the department. Or vote today to table, and the department can come back with a proposed revision. I want you to know that I don't make this request lightly. In the prior decade, I served on a school committee myself. I currently write policies that are adopted by our local school board. However, 57053 is a potentially catastrophic, undefined provision, and I wouldn't be here otherwise. The proposed regulation otherwise is great. It mostly validates the work and confirms the practices we've adhered to for years in Lynn. 75% of our students have a first language other than English. 45% of our students are L's. 64% of our families have a preferred language of Spanish for communications home, and 87% of our students are in the high needs category. We've tried different computer translation tools. We've picked quality ones. We've decided against others. Even with the quality ones, we have implemented a spot checking system, and we can make global fixes as needed. And the truth, doing this day to day, is that there are not many with those quality products. Lynn has computer generated or assisted 126 pages of documents this school year, and I would ask that you please reconsider the provision as many public commenters have shared. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Next up, I'd like to call Kayla Kaufman-Seidemann, the Legal Director of Mass Advocates for Children, on the proposed new regulations for interpretation and translation services in schools.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kayla Kaufman, and I'm an education staff attorney with a focus on immigrant students and newcomer families at Massachusetts Advocates for Children. I am here on behalf of Diana Santiago, MAC's legal director, who is out of the office today, to discuss the regulations to implement the Protect Education Equity Act enacted last summer. I want to first thank DESE for thoughtfully considering much of the feedback received through the public comment process. MAC can see that the regulations have been thoroughly improved. However, MAC remains seriously concerned about several issues that could result in a failure to implement important provisions of the new state law. This past year, MAC supported almost 750 immigrant and multilingual families calling our helpline. Through our advocacy, we see the devastating impact of language access barriers resulting from inadequately trained interpreters. We see parents who sign away their children's rights because they do not understand the content of certain documents. We see guardians who accept harmful placements for their children because an interpreter has failed to adequately explain the difference between a general education and a substantially separate setting. We see parents concerned when their child comes home with bruises that staff are unable to explain in their primary language. I am lucky enough to be a native Spanish speaker. This privilege has allowed me to step in during team meetings where I have noticed inadequate translation for my Spanish-speaking clients. But this is not the case when my clients speak Amharic or Haitian Creole. In those instances, I must trust that the interpreter is qualified to do their job. This trust would be far easier with strengthened regulations. MAC understands the need for the interpreter waiver provision. However, we believe it is overly broad. We are proposing an amendment requiring a district seeking a waiver to describe its plan to comply with the regulations in the future. There cannot be a loophole for districts to avoid compliance. MAC would also like to address the legacy provision for advanced educational interpreters. The regulations state that less advanced educational interpreters can only be legacied or grandfathered if they held their role when the Protect Education Equity Act was enacted. The same should be true of advanced educational interpreters. We propose a technical amendment which will avoid the need for training individuals already serving in the role when the Protect Education Equity Act was enacted, while ensuring that going forward, all interpreters have required training. We also propose an amendment to require the superintendent to describe how they ascertained the employee was proficient in both languages and understands specialized terms, given many superintendents will not be bilingual themselves. Thank you all for your time. We hope the board will consider these amendments before approving the regulations. And finally, MAC wants to note that we stand with the MTA and others organizing to ensure safe protocols and procedures in all school districts to protect immigrant students and educators impacted by ICE enforcements in our public schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next up, I'd like to call Michael Klein from the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School, a parent.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for your time. I'm happy to be here with you today. My name is Michael Klein, and I am here representing the small group of families that Commissioner Martinez referenced in his memo last week, and in very strong support of the new condition that he recommends be imposed on this charter school. I've been a PVCI CS parent for 17 years, and I hold a doctorate in applied and professional psychology from Rutgers. In February of last year, I made the 2-hour trip here to urge the board not to approve expansion of this charter school. We suggested you can't consider a school worthy of expansion that has had long-standing governance and oversight issues acknowledged within the very same motion. You voted 6-4 to expand, kicking the can of inadequate governance down the road. This new condition and an independent review you're voting on today is very welcome news. We believe it's long overdue. We believe it can also go further than it suggests it will. PVCICS has been run very much like a family-owned business by 3 people. The executive director, Richard Alcorn, his wife, Kathy Wong, principal, and their longtime colleague and board chair, Charles Bagley, a former financial engineering professor. Richard and Kathy are both MIT graduates. We believe the triumvirate has managed DESE the way that the MIT blackjack team managed casinos, counting cards while staying just inside the letter of the rules. For at least 14 years, this department's reports have flagged concerns of oversight, leadership, and governance. Since 2022 alone, the school has accumulated 13 findings of noncompliance, in addition to multiple OML violations that are noted in the Commissioner's memo. That was as of last September. When I raised the number with the Executive Director Alcorn last fall, he suggested this number of violations was common and asked me how neighboring Amherst had done. I looked into it. Amherst, a much larger district at the time, had 0 findings of non-compliance compared to PBCSS's 13, and that's just since 2022. Other parents have told me they're afraid to come forward about their concerns for fear of retaliation. I understand that fear. In fall 24, my son was elected by his peers as a student representative to the PVCI board. As I personally began raising concerns about the principal and oversight, he was prohibited from serving in that role for a semester, an action your department found to be out of compliance. At high school graduation last month, despite service to school and community that exceeded most of his classmates, he was not recognized for any of that service, although his friends were. We urge you to vote yes on this new motion. We urge you to take the findings of this third party very seriously and to consider revoking the charter given the long history of this school. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call Charles Bagley, the board chair of Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Board of Elementary Education. Thank you very much. My name is Charles Bagley. I'm the chair of the Chinese Immersion, Pioneer Valley Charter Immersion Charter School. Thank you for this opportunity to address you today. It's my understanding the board has received a recommendation from the Commissioner to remove 3 existing conditions placed on our school, the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School, while simultaneously imposing a new condition. I respectfully ask you to remove the existing condition being imposed on us. Our board has worked diligently to satisfy the 3 conditions previously imposed. In fact, the board has submitted evidence demonstrating compliance by December of 2025 deadline. Despite our timely and good faith efforts, these conditions remain in place today. Our continued existence, the continued existence of these conditions has had real consequences. Most significantly, they may hinder our ability to secure financing necessary to develop our second school facility and expand access to our educational opportunities our families seek. As noted in the memo before you, our school is deeply committed to serving students from historically low-income communities, including Springfield, Holyoke, and Greenfield. We support that mission by providing free transportation to students from those communities and by ensuring access to a high-quality educational program. Any action that further impairs our ability to secure financing also impairs our ability to expand educational opportunities for those students and families. I'm particularly concerned that the proposed new conditions would extend this uncertainty through at least December 2026. After meeting prior conditions, it has taken months to have the conditions officially removed. As such, it is difficult to understand when the school will be free of conditions and be able to move forward with long-term planning and financing. This continued uncertainty creates significant challenges for the school's future growth and sustainability. We also understand that the proposed conditions stem from concerns regarding governance. As a member of this board, I take these concerns very seriously. However, I believe that the concerns as represented are vague and unsupported by specific evidence demonstrating a failure of governance. Our board understands and embraces its responsibilities and operates independently of management, providing oversight of the executive director and principal, and are committed to fulfilling our legal and fiduciary obligations. The board believes improvements are necessary. If the board believes improvements are necessary, these expectations should be clearly articulated and try to sorry, the bell disturbed me, and impose conditions based on generalized concerns without clear benchmarks for success that creates uncertainty rather than accountability. My time's up, but I thank you for your help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, I'd like to call Karis McLaughlin, speaking on civic engagement and graduation suggestions.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Good morning, everyone. Have a good summer. I won't see you for 2 months. And Rhoda, congratulations. I have learned so much from Rhoda, especially her rendition of the McDuffie Act. I love that. And thank you for all you've done for the kids. Today, I'm concerned about the graduation requirements, or the lack thereof. Without accountability of some measure, our kids aren't going to do well because our systems are not equal. DESE runs about 5 different systems. One for affluent children, one for children who are middle class, one for kids in receivership, another one for vocational ed. I'm missing one, but I won't waste your time. But none of these systems are equal, especially when it comes to kids of color and disadvantaged kids. So in 1847, Roberts v. City of Boston, that parent asked for his child, a little black girl, to go to the best neighborhood school that she could go to, the one that was closest to her home. There's a lawsuit that's coming, or it's already out there, around lifting up children, 225,000 children, to go somewhere else to be educated. And what I want to tell DESE is parents of color never asked for their kids to travel all over this state to be educated well. They have done it because that's all that they were given, because we never fixed the neighborhood school. Every kid should be able to look at their neighborhood school and think that that's a viable institution that will take them wherever they need to go. I live in Boston. I can point to 10 in my neighborhood that aren't viable. That's a shame. So when we look at the graduation, that's the beginning, and then when we look at the graduation rates, we're 15. Did you all see that? I got an alert that we're number 15 in graduation rates. I hope that's not true. I hope that's a misprint. But if it's true, we have a serious problem. And so therefore, and I had a conversation with Max this morning to share my concerns about lack of accountability, because as I shared with Max, we're on our way out. I mean, if I have a few more years to harass you all, that will be good. But that's not going to last forever. And so I'm more concerned right this minute about legacy and what we leave behind for these children. These children have suffered for centuries, not hundreds of years, I mean actual centuries. It's time for us to fix it. And so what I shared with Max was that if every kid could leave, and this points to the civic engagement issue, if every kid could leave knowing what the Declaration of Independence, the US Constitution and its amendments, and those sorts of political documents which ensure that they know how to guard their rights, if every kid knew that by 10th grade, I would say they're ready. Do something that's meaningful for these kids. We cannot go on the fallacy that our school districts are equal. They are not. I have spent the last 2 months in Boston, and I am disturbed. I am disturbed. And so please look at a level of accountability that doesn't take a lot of time, that is standardized for every single kid in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so that we are ensured that by 10th grade, they are able to participate in dual enrollment and to move on with career and college readiness that we have promised them for decades. And so I thank you again for allowing me to speak. I really do appreciate it. And have a safe and happy summer.
Thanks, Karis. Next up, I'd like to call Dr. Nikki Freeman and Jody Kipnis from the Holocaust Museum of Boston. Speaking on civics education across the Commonwealth.
Good morning, Chair Craven and members of the board. My name is Jody Kipnis, and I am the president and CEO of Holocaust Legacy Foundation, which is currently creating a Holocaust Museum Boston, and it is under construction right across from the Massachusetts State House, if you haven't seen the construction yet, and it's scheduled to open in the spring of 2027. Joining me here today is Dr. Nicole Friedman. She is our Director of Education, and she is a Holocaust educator and curriculum specialist who leads the development of our education programming, teacher resources, and school partnerships. When people hear Holocaust Museum, they often think our work is only about preserving history, but at its core, our mission is about civic engagement. The Holocaust forces us to confront important questions. What happens when democratic institutions weaken? How does misinformation influence society? What responsibilities do individuals have when they witness injustice? At Holocaust Museum Boston, we are not trying to tell visitors what to think. We are helping them learn how to think critically, evaluate information, and understand their roles as citizens. The lessons of the Holocaust are not just historical. They remind us that democracy is fragile, participation matters, and the choices individuals make can shape the future.
Thank you. As an educator, I believe civic engagement begins with curiosity, critical thinking, and meaningful dialogue. Holocaust Museum Boston preserves and shares the history of the Holocaust through various voices of survivors, authentic artifacts, and evidence-based educational experience that inspire reflection and civic responsibility. We are committed to helping visitors and learners of all ages examine the choices made by individuals, institutions, and societies during one of history's darkest periods, while encouraging thoughtful engagement with the challenges facing all of us today. The museum experience will challenge students to examine evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and wrestle with questions that unfortunately remain relevant today. What would you risk to help someone? When does silence become participation? What responsibilities come with citizenship? Through standards-aligned educational programs, educator resources, and professional learning opportunities, we are creating experiences that support Commonwealth goals for both genocide education and civics education. Our goal is for students to leave not only with historical knowledge of the Holocaust, but also with a stronger sense of agency, the understanding that their choices matter and that they have a role to play in their schools, communities, and our democracy. History doesn't tell us what to do, it helps us understand why our choices matter. Civic engagement begins when people recognize they have both the power and responsibility to act. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and we are grateful for the board's continued support and commitment to civics education, and we look forward to partnering with schools across Massachusetts to prepare informed and active citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call Max Page from the MTA, speaking on the graduation report.
Good morning. This is your last meeting. It's also my last meeting as president of the MTA. Some of you will be very pleased to know that the direction of the MTA will continue in this way because we've just elected Matt Bach, president in the Andover local, and Deb Gesualdo, president of the Malden local. Now, all union challenges, losses, and victories are collective, and so I just want to highlight three. Over these past years, the commitments that we've made, and they all stem from our constitutional dictate order that we cherish our public schools. So first is that we are fully always going to defend the idea of a full whole child education in our schools. I got in trouble when I was first vice president here talking about how we don't just prepare students merely for the corporations around us to underpay them. We train our students for work, for career, for civic life, for lifelong learning, for creative life, for being good neighbors and citizens in this Commonwealth, and we will be committed to that. There are parts of the graduation report proposals that we support. We put forward a Mass Core legislation last January of 2025, and we support that. We support other elements of it. Obviously, we fundamentally disagree, and the voters of this Commonwealth disagree with new standardized tests that will have high stakes in our schools, and so we will continue that battle right through to the end. Secondly, what I'm so proud of this union is that we have fought for the working and learning conditions inside the public schools, as well as following this self-evident truth, which if you care for your students in your school buildings, you better care for their lives outside the school buildings. So this union with AFT, with BTU, with SEIU, with the whole Raise Up Massachusetts coalition won the $11 minimum wage, the $15 minimum wage, paid family medical leave, sick leave for everyone. We also won the Fair Share Amendment that is delivering $3.5 billion every single year for public education and transportation. Last year, lawyers paid for by all of us together, that is the unions, defeated this attempt by the plutocrats to impose a $5 billion cut in our school budgets. So I just will let you know that that is the direction we all should be understanding. Better working and learning conditions inside the schools must be paralleled by the better living conditions of our families outside. And then finally, which I thought the police detail was a welcome of a hero's goodbye for me, but I guess it was not. It was for the incredible heroes in this room, the students, the parents, the community members who have defended their students every step of the way outside of their schools, because the most fundamental commitment that we make in public education, I believe this board as well as all of our educators, is that we educate every student. Every student. We do not make distinction on anything other than that. And so what they're here to do is invite you. It's not an attack, it's an invitation to do even more to defend our students. They just got $70 billion more for ICE's infrastructure. They aren't going away, and they're probably coming back in earnest in a place like Massachusetts. So we're urging you all to do more to get your administrators, your educators prepared to defend our students as one of our most sacred missions in public education. So it has been a pleasure, and I look forward to the continuing efforts to make this, and continue to make this, the best public education system in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call up Ed Lambert from the Mass Business Alliance for Education on the graduation report, state graduation standards.
Good morning. I'm here today to speak in support of the High School Graduation Council report released last week. While acknowledging that there are more details that need to be worked out, MBAE believes that the report establishes a strong foundation upon which the state can create a set of uniform standards that set all students up for future success. The Secretary and the Commissioner deserve credit for delivering a final product that is clear, comprehensive, integrated, and well-developed. We believe the final report improved on last November's initial draft in several ways, most notably by elevating the role that career and academic planning can play in developing each student's pathway to graduation, by embedding required milestones in MyCap, which would include financial literacy, artificial intelligence, digital literacy, and a required work-based learning experience that can provide critical career exposure and attainment of workplace skills. MBAE has long supported adoption of a rigorous curriculum for all students, and we see the Mass Core element of the report as a central feature which, if correctly implemented, with auditing to ensure content delivery, can help drive high achievement, ensuring all students attain the academic knowledge and skills they need. A strong foundation in core academic subjects is essential for every student, no matter what path they choose after high school. But we also know that simply taking a class does not guarantee learning. Grading can be subjective and varies across classrooms, schools, and districts. As a result, students are too often told they're ready for life after high school when they are not. And so we were pleased that the recommendations include a requirement for the use of state-designed end-of-course exams that would meaningfully count toward graduation. And while we know the report contemplates further discussion of the subject, we want to state strongly that including them as a component and then saying students wouldn't have to pass them would be unacceptable. Having a common assessment with scoring that is impervious to grade inflation and grading policies that vary from one district to the next has to be an essential element of the final graduation system. It's necessary to ensure we have equity and high standards for all students, not just some. And so to that end, I wish to present a statement to you all today, which I believe has already been distributed, signed by leaders from both the business and higher education communities, calling for the state to require that students pass end-of-course assessments to determine whether they have mastered core academic content and foundational skills. These assessments would provide a clear, consistent, and objective signal of readiness regardless of where the student lives or their socioeconomic status. The statement is signed by over 20 business-led organizations, as well as the Mass Association of Community Colleges and the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. Critics of testing like to point to the 2024 ballot question and overplay the fact that they believe that voters voted to eliminate all testing, and yet final exams are still given in all of our schools, that students are required to pass. Parents and families want comparable, honest information about whether or not their students are ready, and they can only get that from a state-designed end-of-course assessment that students would be required to pass. Because these exams are directly aligned to course content, teaching students to succeed on the assessment is synonymous with teaching the essential standards they are expected to master. Holding students to high standards by requiring them to pass a test is not punitive. It is a measure designed to ensure that we collectively help every student reach that high bar. It prepares students for the real world and ensures they've received the foundational instructional support necessary for their future success. Students can and do rise to high expectations when they're afforded the right instruction, support, and opportunity. Massachusetts owes them nothing less than a diploma that truly reflects their readiness to succeed. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ed. Next, I'd move on to my opening comments. It's our last meeting, and I think it's Rhoda's last meeting with us. And I really want to congratulate Rhoda on her retirement, but also for her guidance through the years to me personally. Rhoda was one of the original writers of Chapter 766, which is the seminal nationwide special education law, which is amazing. I'm not dating you, Rhoda, but that was Chapter 766 of the Acts of 1972. And you were part of that, which is amazing to me because the 1975 Federal Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was basically written on the basis of what Rhoda did and others in 1972 on Chapter 766. So being the mom of a child with Down syndrome, I can tell you what a big role that's played in our lives and my sister's life, who had Down syndrome also. So this is really a credit to you, and I know we'll be talking more about Rhoda, but I wanted to make sure I used my couple of minutes to express my sincere thanks to Rhoda. And next I'll call on Marianne Stewart, who led our Educator Diversification Committee, and just to get an update from you, Marianne, at the end of the year.
Quick update to my colleagues. I chair the Educator Diversity Committee that the chair implemented as a result of the 2024 law that passed in November that year. The department had been working since that, actually before that time, so it was good that we were able to get a little committee together to start some oversight of the work. I serve with my colleagues, Ms. Dalida Hasha, Dr. Erica Fisher, and Ms. Kristen Smitty. We held meetings in January, February, April, and June 2nd. And really it was the first two meetings were to just kind of get up to speed on what the department had been working on and to clarify our role for oversight. It's really just to understand, what the department has been working on in light of, we saw, in March and April, we saw the regulations come forward around licensure. That's part of the work that DESE had been working on relative to this committee. In April and in June, we had stakeholder meetings where we really got to hear from first statewide groups. We heard from the Massachusetts School Administrators Association and also we had two stakeholder panels The first one was focused on educator pipelines and community engagement. That was with Massachusetts School Administrators Association. And then we had preparation pathways and innovations with representatives from Elms College, UMass Lowell, Salem State University, and Boston Teacher Residency Program. And so then we discussed a little bit about what we heard with those. And then in June, we continued some panel conversations with local control, more of practitioner-rooted work and perspectives from the Teachers Lounge, the Association of Multilingual and Multicultural Educators, also known as AMCEL, the Student Advisory Committee, and Isabella updated us on their work, and the MTA and the AFT, American Federation of Teachers Massachusetts, also weighed in. So the through line has really just been getting us up to speed on the work that the department has been doing, and we haven't really laid out any next steps, for the second half of 2026. But all the minutes have been, except for June, we haven't voted on those yet, but the previous meeting minutes have been voted on and are on the board, on the department's website under the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for
Yeah.
chairing this important committee. And I know we have other work going on right now, but I really wanted to thank you for doing this year, and for the staff at DESE that have supported you in this work. Next, I'd like to call on Secretary Zreich.
Good morning, everybody. I want to begin by shouting out Rhoda, who I've had a chance to work with. I don't want to say how many years, but I haven't been around quite as long as you. But you've always been a person of integrity, and always focused on the best interest of children. And it will be a major loss as you transition into the next exciting chapter of your life. So thank you, Rhoda. I'd also like to give my gratitude to all the educators as we close out the school year. As many of you know, I'm married to an educator, and people pour their hearts, they pour all their energy into kids throughout the school year, and they deserve the opportunity to recharge, reset, and just grateful for the time and the work that is put in. This is not an easy time with everything being thrown at schools and in the federal landscape, and I just want to express my gratitude. I hope everybody gets the time that they need to come back excited in the fall on behalf of our kids, so thank you. As you know, last evening we presented the board in greater detail about the graduation recommendations. I had recently had the opportunity to visit several school districts to see some of these recommendations in action, and I just want to call those out. At Somerset Berkeley Regional High School, I watched students present capstone projects on topics ranging from investigative journalism and community cleanliness to sustainability and housing. Students had completed internships, also shared their experiences, and reflected on the lessons they had gained through these structured, career-connected learning opportunities. And one student spoke movingly about her internship at a hospice center, describing the profound impact of caring for patients who required expert support, compassion, and dignity during the final days of their lives. Her reflections demonstrated not only professional growth for her, but also empathy, maturity, and a deep sense of purpose is one of the things we're looking for as we roll out these graduation requirements. I also had the opportunity to engage with students about their civic action projects at Chelsea's Clark Avenue Middle School and at the Edward Kennedy Institute's showcase that DESE helps organize. Students identified pressing community issues, they conducted research, analyzed data, and presented thoughtful evidence-based solutions. These experiences exemplify the kinds of critical thinking, problem solving, and civic engagement skills that are essential for success in post-secondary education, careers, and civic life that are aligned to the Massachusetts vision of a graduate, which holds up thinkers, contributors, and leaders as what we want our students to be when they get their diploma. And so there's already a lot of great work happening across our schools that we want to continue to elevate, and are helping young people understand, that helps them clarify what they want for their futures, deepen their understanding of their interests and their strengths as they move through their high school career. It speaks to how important, meaningful, relevant, and connected to the world around them, how important that is that they have those experiences, and gives them the confidence that they need to be able to succeed and have a profound impact on their community. I was also proud to be at Worcester Tech earlier this month, where I had an opportunity to hear from early college students and about how impactful the experience has been for them. We had also the opportunity to announce the largest early college expansion in state history with the approval of 29 new early college partnerships, adding over 1,600 additional seats this fall. And with this latest round of designations, 23 high schools are launching their first early college programs. In total, 101 high schools, 1 out of every 4 in Massachusetts, are partnering with 35 higher education institutions to support more than 12,000 early college students in the upcoming 26-27 school year. And then finally, I would like to close my remarks by thanking the Massachusetts Legislature for its continued commitment to and investment in public education. In particular, we are grateful for the support provided through the Fair Share supplemental budget that includes funding for early literacy initiatives, such as the Literacy Launch program and high-dosage tutoring. And this investment, combined with the legislature's support of the literacy bill, the expertise and leadership of the department, of the DESE staff, and the strong commitment of school districts across the Commonwealth, gives me great confidence that we can accelerate reading outcomes for our youngest learners across Massachusetts. Thank you very much. I hope everybody enjoys their much-deserved summer vacation.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Moving on to Commissioner Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Chair. Thank you, Secretary. I also want to just thank all of our staff out in the field. This last year, actually, some of our schools are still finishing out this year with the goal of Friday being the last day of school, because with all the snow days on top of very difficult budget conditions, so I want to call that out. So I just want to, again, just thank all the superintendents, all the district leaders, of course, all of our teachers and school leaders and district staff. But thank you again, as I finish my first year officially this month. I also want to thank the board. I'm still learning, so I still continue to ask for grace, but really, the board has been nothing but supportive, especially you, Chair. And so again, just thank you, as I'm still, not only learning the state, but also learning the role. So again, I just want to, again, always continue to ask for grace. And I've been excited because, again, since our last board meeting, I continue to go out and visit the field, because I feel like there's no other way to really understand what's happening in our districts and schools than I have to be there. More important than being there, I actually love getting a feeling of those communities and trying to understand the history of those communities, because all those communities have stories. So, for example, I visited the Montechusett Regional Vocational Tech School in Fitchburg to celebrate the Co-op Award recipients. So we were celebrating not only the students, but also the amazing partners, all the chamber and the different businesses that were there to again, just to support our students, because they see the talent that we see. I was also at the Narragansett Regional High School in Templeton to meet with educators in the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools. And I was also at Crocker Elementary School in Fitchburg. I also visited the Edgar B. Davis K-8 School in Brockton. By the way, one of the few K-8 schools that we have in the state, and a very successful, one of the strongest schools in that district. So it was an interesting just look at what a K structure could look like, because it's one of the few that we have in Massachusetts. I was also at Dayton Rehoboth Regional High School, meeting with students, educators, and school leaders and elected officials who gave me a further insight into the impressive work occurring in the region. And then earlier this month, I visited Country Elementary School in Weston, which was recently recognized as a National Gold Star School by the National Association of Elementary School Principals. I will tell you, it was beautiful, and I was there with Leader Paish. I love the fact that if you haven't been to that campus, it's shared by multiple schools from the district, but also there it is also the library and the park district. And if you have ever seen that combination, it is like magic. I mean, if I could redesign schools across the country, that's the way I would redesign them. Imagine having that all on one campus. So again, it was just great to just really to hear the staff and how much they really care about our students and the culture that they're building in that school. Amazing school leader. So the National Gold Star Program honors outstanding elementary and middle schools that demonstrate a commitment to continuous improvement and collaborative learning communities. Country's elementary success is grounded in its CARE's core values of compassion, adventure, respect, effort, and safety. And as I was welcomed by the preschoolers, I'll tell you, I felt it all the way. I also traveled to Greenfield, so imagine from there going to Greenfield. So I traveled to Greenfield, very different area than Weston, just to say, visiting the Four Rivers Charter Public School, where I saw students taking pride in their work and the impact of dedicated educators, engaged families, and supportive communities. By the way, a school very heavy on the arts, very much committed to the holistic, just the holistic education of our children. And then last week, I visited the Holmes Clifford Academy location. First time there. It's an approved special education in Walpole. The home was started by Abigail Adams, talk about like fun history, and was celebrating its 226th anniversary. I got to visit classrooms and met with students and staff and board members. You know, there's certain schools that leave an impact with you, and I don't know why, but every time I go to one of our specialty schools, there's just things that I don't forget. We met students who went into the school with challenging behaviors and self-regulation, and these are the students that I met, you know, that have been there a few years, and I will tell you, when you talk to them, I mean, again, all you see is the talent, all you see is their dreams and hope, and really talking about how the school transformed their lives. So it's just something that, you know, when you see, you know, in this role, I mean, you always have to take note. And I just see so many amazing opportunities to spread training across best practices across our schools, in different types of schools. And then I visited the Stoughton High School, where students greeted me with the largest welcome sign to date. It was huge. We have pictures of it. And Heights Elementary School in Sharon, where I was joined by Senator Paul Feeney and Representative Ted Phillips. And actually, we have a video, and this is, and I really want to thank our amazing staff for putting this together, because I always joke about this. You know, I'm driving everywhere. You know, the number of miles that I have, I'm driving all over the state, but I really never really know where I'm at, if you know what I mean. I don't have like a Google map in my head, so I'm always wondering like, where am I? You know, and so the staff, because they've heard me say this, created this map. Which shows that over the last school year, and this is not counting events, I visited over 70 schools across the Commonwealth. And so you can now see this on our website, and you can scroll over any one of those visits, and you can see pictures from the visit. So, you know, in our work, we show our work, you know, and so there's always grounded by evidence. So you can actually see pictures from each of those visits. By the way, it's also a great visual for me to say, there's some areas that I gotta visit more, you know, like if you go a little bit west, right, remember Smitty, you know, like, yeah, no, I see it. So again, I will say though, I mean, there's a lot of schools in the east, so, you know, it's just, you know, it's part of it is the size of the state, but again, it just shows you there, again, across the state, the number of schools. So now at least I can say, okay, now that's the part of the state I was in. So again, I want to just thank the staff. I want to thank the many wonderful students, educators, families, and leaders who taught me about their schools during these visits. And again, this interactive map, you'll be able to see it, and it'll be kept up to date. We'll update it throughout all of next year. So hopefully the goal is to just add more dots and continue to, you know, really make that map as dense as possible. Again, thank you everybody for welcoming me in your communities. I also want to highlight this month's rotating art showcase, which features the creativity and growth of students from Marcia Nadeau's class in Pentucket Regional Middle School and High School. I would also like to give a special shout out to Ms. Nadeau and her students for watching this meeting live stream. So thank you, students, for watching this. And again, thank you for letting us enjoy your amazing artwork. The next item, board members, that I want to just give you a quick update on Holland and Dever. I'm pleased to announce that the Up Academy Holland will exit state receivership effective July 1. As a reminder, in the winter, I announced the school would exit receivership upon completion of exit assurances. The Boston Public Schools and the department have jointly committed to exit assurances that will provide stability to the school community during this transition back to local governance. Those exit assurances were issued last week, and the board was provided with a copy. I want to thank the district leadership, BTU leadership, principals of the schools, and my DESE staff for working diligently to complete the insurances. I want to just call out Lauren Wu on this. She has many things on her plate, but this was one that again, was very important to us and was managed very, very well. And we got a lot of positive feedback from all the different stakeholders. I also want to acknowledge that at the conclusion of this week, the Paul A. Dever School will close its doors to students for the last time. As a reminder, on March 20th, 2025, the Boston School Committee voted to close the Dever Elementary School at the conclusion of the 2026 school year, which is the end of this year, as part of a broader school consolidation plan. I want to thank the staff, students, and families for their contributions over a successful year. And I want to acknowledge that this closure, while bittersweet, marks the end of a meaningful chapter. The Paul A. Dever and Up Academy Holland are the two final schools in state receivership, and as a result of these planned transitions, there will be no schools in chronically underperforming status at the start of the 26-27 school year. And board members, as you know, we're approaching this work in a different way. It doesn't mean that we don't have struggling schools, but we are going to be working with those schools and partnering with them and collaborating with them, but this at least ends the formal receivership schools. And then the next item I just want to touch again is on our K-12 Graduation Council final report. Thank you for all the public feedback. Last night, the board held a special meeting to review the statewide Graduations Council final report, Strong Foundations for Bright Futures. The board engaged in a robust conversation about the council's recommendations, including the proposed graduation framework and the recommended implementation timeline, and the next steps for regulation and legislation. Thank you, board members, for raising thoughtful questions, and we appreciate everyone's engagement in this topic and what the consequences and how consequential this will be for our students of the Commonwealth. We will continue to update the board as this work progresses, including as we move toward bringing regulations forward for the foundational coursework component. We remain committed to a transparent, collaborative process as these recommendations move towards implementation. We are grateful to the council, our stakeholders, and the board for the care that's gone into this work, and we'll keep you informed as the work progresses. And what I really want to just call out for last night, board members, you brought out the tensions that just existed, the Secretary and I, and it started with Secretary Tutwiler, but ending with Secretary Zweig, that we have seen across the field. These tensions of balancing the urgency that we have today, because we know that children are not having consistent experiences across the Commonwealth, and that's not okay. And at the same time, this is a very comprehensive set of recommendations that are a lot of work for our districts. And me coming from the field, I would be remiss if I don't say that, because we know how it feels when we're on this side of the field. But we also want to make sure that we really do hold the highest expectations possible, because we're Massachusetts, and that's who we are, and that carries a lot of responsibility for us, and we take that very seriously. So now my final comment, which is now time for us to recognize the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education staff member with the annual presentation of the Mitchell D. Chester Award. Before we announce the recipient's name, I would like to share some background and information on the award. So the Mitchell D. Chester Award was, of course, Mitchell D. Chester was our highly respected commissioner serving from 2008 to 2017. He served 9 years until he passed away at the age of 65. In honor of his memory, DESE created the Mitchell D. Chester Award in 2018 to recognize DESE staff members who demonstrate excellence. Joining us today is Angela San George, the Commissioner Chester's wife. Thank you again for being here, for joining us on this special day as we present this annual award. Chair Craven, before I announce the winner, would you like to say a few words in honor of Mitchell Chester? Because I know you got a chance to work with him.
Several of us on the board, maybe it's just Mary Ann.
He hired.
That's right, and I'll actually turn this to, because Secretary Zweig worked closely with Commissioner Chester, and I'll let Mary Ann say a few words as well, but I just had a flashback, Commissioner Martinez, to the day that I came in and Chairman Paul Sagan of the board pulled me aside and told me that Mitchell had passed away, and it was such a shock. And it was like nobody had known that up to the very last day, Mitchell Chester was here. He was doing his job for the children of the Commonwealth. He was an amazing leader for this department, but also never did he once let anybody see his own personal struggle with. It was just an unbelievable moment to me. I just had this moment of flashback, like being pulled aside, like, what, the commissioner's not here? And so again, it's just fitting that the staff has an annual Mitchell Chester Award to remember Commissioner Chester, because it seems still in a lot of ways like it was an amazing shock to everybody, I think, when he passed away, and even to this day, I can't articulate that any more strongly. Mary Ann, would you like to?
I'll just say that I met Mitchell when he first came in as commissioner. I came in with one of the board members, the parent rep at the time, and talked to him about parent and family engagement. And he was, very focused on listening. He had particular ideas about how that should go that didn't really agree with some of what I had to say, but he was very clear about it. And I would just say that I think his decade with the department and in the state has really left a long-lasting policy legacy so far that we've seen. So yeah, it definitely had an impact here.
And Secretary Reich?
Yeah, I just, he gave me an opportunity to lead the receivership in Holyoke. And one thing people didn't always see about Mitchell is I've never seen somebody who cared more deeply about the most underserved children in the Commonwealth. And for him, this was a calling. The work was a calling, and his commitment to doing whatever he could to support the Commonwealth's most needy children is something that has stayed with me. His passing was a major loss. He was a tremendous thought partner. He knew the data better than anyone I think I had ever worked with, and pushed me in ways that really grew me as a professional. It was not always easy to hear the hard truths that he would bring to the table, but it was all for the right reasons. So, very honored to celebrate the next recipient of the Mitchell Chester Award today.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I also wanted to mention that somewhere in the audience, Mara Banter, who was the chairman of the Board of Education when Mitchell was hired, is here. Oh. And so I turn this back to you, Commissioner.
Yep. So at this time, it is my honor to present the 2025 Mitchell D. Chester Award to not only our amazing Rhoda Schneider. Before we give Rhoda her award, I want to just say a few things about her. So the Mitchell Chester Award, the Chester Award recipient recognizes the kind of exemplary leadership, intellectual curiosity, courage, broad perspective, commitment to educational equity, focus on student success, skillful mentoring, data-driven approach, and kindness that Commissioner Chester himself exemplified. And Rhoda, I have experienced that all year with you, all of those qualities. Rhoda Schneider, DESE General Counsel, has lived these values for more than 4 decades at DESE. Rhoda served with Commissioner Chester and had a strong respect for his work and commitment to public education. Rhoda would always be a perfect choice for the Mitchell Chester Award, but today is the perfect, albeit bittersweet time for Rhoda to receive this award. Today is Rhoda's final board meeting before she enters retirement late this summer. Rhoda has served as the DESE General Counsel for 48 years and has served the agency for over 50 years. I just want that to sink in. We talk about service, but that is deep service. So I just want that to sink in for everybody. Rhoda may be the longest serving general counsel in the Massachusetts executive branch. She exemplifies the kind of leadership that makes an agency stronger, not through authority alone, but through the steady confidence that she brings to every challenge. I will tell you, board members, whenever I bring any issues to Rhoda, there's a calmness that she exudes that makes me feel calmer. As general counsel, Rhoda navigates some of the most complex terrain at DESE and across the state, including the high-stakes legal questions that carry real consequences for students and schools. In each of these moments, she leads with calm, a clear-eyed assurance that grounds those around her and moves her work forward. What sets Rhoda apart is her rare ability to make the complex accessible. Whether it's untangling a thorny regulatory question or brainstorming on how to approach a difficult matter, she has a gift for distilling difficult issues into language that informs them and empowers without losing the nuance that matters. She brings insights that sharpen the agency's thinking and decision-making. She's also an outstanding mentor who gives generously of her time and expertise to all, guiding them through highly technical questions and perhaps most valuably, modeling how to approach the complex, multidimensional challenges with both rigor and grace. Rhoda truly embodies the qualities that live with Mitchell Chester's legacy. Today, we are proud to recognize someone like Mitchell Chester that has modeled what it means to lead with vision, humility, and commitment to students. Congratulations, Rhoda. We are very grateful for your contributions to DESE. Please, Rhoda, come up and receive your award.
Yes.
Squishing people. Yeah, the light doesn't.
Where are we going? Now I'll just have the board, wait, where did I lose Mary Ann?
She's
Marty.
standing up.
Give a couple more
Here comes
minutes.
Marty. Yep, here comes Marty.
Comes Marty.
Yep.
Okay, getting back to it, we have one ministerial order of business, which is the minutes. Do I hear a motion on the approval of the minutes of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education's regular meeting on May 19th?
Moved.
And any comments, changes, questions, discussion on the minutes?
For the regular minutes? I have one on the executive session.
We're doing them together.
Well, I would be honored to adopt your last name. Lisa wasn't okay with it. It's too many last names. And I am listed as Hills Craven. So
Nice.
Lisa and I decided we're not going to do it, but so take out the Craven.
All right, thank you for the edit. I just was trying to do something, Matt, that expanded, my name brand, right? No, that's a typo. So at the exception of that typo, are there any other changes, comments? If not, and I need to call a roll, and Helene is here to do that conveniently for us because we have one member that's remote. Helene, please call the roll.
Yes. Member Fisher?
Yes.
Member Graham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Member Hasha?
Yes.
Member Smithy?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
And Secretary's right.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Unanimous. Motion
Helene.
passes. You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to move on to the agenda items, and the first order of business is the State Student Advisory Council end-of-year report with our voting member, Isabella Chamberlain.
Wait for the.
So I just got to say this, everybody. We always talk about this, and especially for our high school students. Our seniors always in every state, they always get to graduate early, so they actually finish before the other students. And we have this term called senioritis that kind of hits seniors, and it's always like, and seniors would always ask me, like, are you sure, superintendent, that colleges even look at your grades in your last year? It's like, they look at your grades in the last year, so please make sure you finish out strong. I can tell you right now, you'll see this report from our student member, there was no senioritis with Isabella. And I just got to say, we continue to rave about this because it feels like she's one of our own. She's going to be attending Fordham University next year. And we've been to her high school, which they all love her. They're all so proud of her. And she, I was able to meet the teachers that inspired her. And so again, Isabella, want to share how proud we are of you. And again, I just want to say, your presentation will show the amazing work in your leadership.
Thank you so much. Okay. Like mentioned, this is the State Student Advisory Council end-of-year presentation. I know I came to you guys, not really in the middle of the year, but I gave a mid-year presentation on our progress. So this is just a general overview of our final recommendations. So for a quick update, anyone here needs an update or in the audience needs an update, the State Student Advisory Council consists of students from across 5 regions in Massachusetts, and our work is to elevate student concerns and connect students from across Massachusetts. Today, I'll be talking about a quick snapshot of the year, and then the State Student Advisory Council to the board connections, and then finally, our year focus and our final recommendations from each of our regions and our state recommendations, and then looking forward as a state council. So quickly, I also just want to give a reminder of our framework. So this is how we operate throughout the entire year. Each of our regions use this, and it starts with data analysis and then connecting with stakeholders. And then finally implementing our action plans and then preparing our final reports, as well as my final report here to you all. So I just wanted to keep a slide here for you guys if you would like to look over that. Additionally, on these next two slides are a few graphics and just some information on how many students and schools in our regions actually participate. So you can see how many students went into these processes and how many students contributed to their recommendations. And then the State Student Advisory Council consists of 30 members. So each region has 6 members of leadership, and they all go to the State Student Advisory Council. Here as well. So firstly, a year in review, just some highlights that I wanted to speak about for the year. Firstly, our students use extensive amounts of state level data to support our highlighted concerns, which is something that is super important to our work, is really making sure that we're grounded in our data. And so I was really happy to see that in all of our final reports across regions, the main thing that was highlighted was the data that was used, and everything came out of that data. We also held multiple successful regional and state level stakeholder engagement events, both at, like I mentioned, at the regional and state level. Examples of people who were invited, we had a lot of variety of individuals. We had principals, superintendents, counselors at the regional level. And at the state level, we had a lot of DESE employees and a lot of state level organizations that came to represent and answer our questions. And we received a lot of positive comments and feedback from all the people who attended these regional and state level engagement sessions, just regarding the structure, but especially the students' preparation and the information that they shared, the questions that they had to ask. And that was obviously very exciting to hear about. Here as well this is I think one of the most important slides. It really shows the flow of communication between all of our regions. So as you can see, it goes from the regional councils, and then the arrows show that information flows from our regional councils to their leadership up to the State Student Advisory Council, and the membership and the leadership will share with us during our State Student Advisory Council meetings what's been going on in their regions. And then up at the board level, at our state meetings, the information comes down and I can share with them our agenda items. I share with them what we talk about so that discussion can be had. I'll speak to that in the next slide. And then continues down back to the region. So this just shows our flow of communication, and that it's constantly going from region to region. It's not just up to the state level and then to the board and doesn't come back down, because we think it's really important that all the information is shared and that we get perspectives from students in all of our regions. Another thing I want to highlight here is that all of the leadership is elected by students on the State Student Advisory Council. So students are elected by their peers in their own school to represent their region, and then from there, students in their region elect their leadership, and then on the State Student Advisory Council, we elect all of our leadership, and they're the ones who also elected me to this position. So I think that's an important thing to highlight. So highlights of just council support on multiple ends. So firstly, like I mentioned before, during each of our State Student Advisory Council meetings, we make it a point to I give updates on, depending on the date of our State Student Advisory Council meeting. Sometimes it lands after a board meeting or right before. So I'll share future or past agenda items and give the opportunity to ask questions. We'll also have discussions sometimes. And then information is then brought back to the regional councils by the representatives so that they can have discussions at the regional level. If they have questions, they can bring it back up. And that kind of goes back to the flow of communication that we have. And then additionally, if there's any other information that is needed or need to give it out, we often disseminate feedback forms to representatives. So an example is actually for the Educator Diversity Committee. We shared all of the questions that they sent to me and the State Student Advisory Council advisors, and we had everyone on the State Council answer their questions, and then I used all that information, and that's what I shared at the meeting. Or we'll hold office hours occasionally hosted by myself and my advisors for representatives to join. I think the main one that we had this year was at the beginning of the year when the MCAS data was shared. I felt there was a lot of data and it was a lot to go through, and I felt it was necessary to give them the opportunity if they wanted to really go in depth and hear about it. And so I held an office hour where I went through all the data and shared it with them because it was just too much to go through during a meeting. But yeah. Okay, so on to our final recommendations and considerations. One thing I do want to highlight, or two things I want to highlight, is that a more detailed, in-depth version of these recommendations will be shared in a written final report that'll be shared with you all, and that will be public. This is just a general overview in interest of time. As well as you'll see on the next few slides, each slide, I'll give an example here, there's 4 of our regions, and then here there's 5. So you see this difference because, especially because of the amount of students in each region and what the students want to focus on. Sometimes regions focused on everything, on all. We have 3 recommendations. Sometimes each region did each of them. Some regions did 2 of them. Some regions just focused on 1, and so that's why you see a differing amount in the recommendations. Okay, so starting with bullying, harassment, and discrimination. For our regional recommendations, I'll just share what's really highlighted here, but Greater Boston really focused on streamlining reporting, so having universal bias response forms across districts. Northeast really focused on awareness and education, so one thing that they really highlighted was guest speakers and experts to come into schools to increase empathy in their students, so guest speakers who have went through bullying, harassment, and discrimination themselves, and they can speak to that. Southeast spoke about expanding training and visibility of counselors so students know what resources they have available, but also increasing that connection between the students and counselors. And then Western Mass also spoke to standardizing clear definitions with bullying across schools, increasing intervention training programs, also increasing adult supervision in schools, and then strengthening student and adult trust systems as well. So a compilation of all of that for our state level recommendation. We hope that across the state, there's the adoption of more unified approaches within districts to prevent and address bullying, harassment, and discrimination. But our priorities center on standardizing those definitions and the reporting processes, increasing access to our trusted adults, and then expanding education and awareness. For emotional development and well-being, Central Mass focused on implementation of more flex blocks and mental health days for students. Greater Boston wanted to raise student awareness of counseling services, peer support programs, other resources. Northeast spoke to mental health and well-being discussions in curriculums, so conversations about mental health earlier on in the school year, or not in the school year, but earlier on in the education process so that students can work through their issues or just learn about emotional development and well-being earlier on so they can better understand themselves and the people around them. And then Southeast wanted to implement actions that increase student sense of belonging, so more activities and events in their districts, such as the ones highlighted there, so culture nights, affinity groups, clubs, to have more places where students can connect with each other. And then Western Mass spoke to the emphasis of sleep health in high school health and biology in all curriculums. For the state level recommendation, as you'll see through the first slide and then the next slide, it's really just a compilation of all of the regional recommendations. But of course, we recommend that our approaches be implemented by all districts, but more flex block time and mental health days into schedules, building a stronger sense of community or student belonging through inclusive activities, and teaching more mental health skills and the importance of sleep from kindergarten through graduation in their approaches. For nutrition and nutritional environments, Greater Boston wanted to strengthen partnerships with local farms and food producers and also require the use of the school health index or other similar assessment tools in all districts. Northeast wanted to also partner with local farms to improve the quality of foods and also include nutrition education in more curriculum. And then Western Mass spoke to more student surveys to find out the things the foods that students not only would like to eat themselves, but would like to see in their cafeterias that represent them. And then for our state recommendations, we hope that there's more promotion of policies, practices, programs that expand nutrition education in our classrooms, such as building those partnerships with local farms and businesses, and investing more in training and resources for food service staff, but also nutrition education. And we also hope that students and families are more involved in the process to plan their own menus and their recipes to make sure that the meals in their schools reflect the cultural diversity of their own communities. Now, looking forward for the 26-27 State Student Advisory Council year, right now we are working on regional council elections, and we're in the process of going on to state elections and then also electing the new board member. And we will also have a summer leadership retreat in August for all of our State Student Advisory Council members, which we've had for the past few years. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys. I'm open to any comments or questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? Mary Ann?
Thank you. I love the recommendations coming from the regions regarding flex days. I think that is so important, and especially when we're moving into a whole new graduation mindset and, you know, the council report and trying to figure out how that's all going to work out. I think it'd be really important to work in these types of recommendations from students that really empower them. And, you know, if we're asking much more from students going forward, it's really critical that they also be aware of their mental health and their emotional state and be able to take those flexible days you know, during the course of a year. So I love that, and thank you for convening the council in this effort. It's terrific. I also just want to say at this point, give you your flowers and how wonderful it's been working with you, getting to know you, meet you. Last summer when you introduced yourself to me, we met for coffee and just got to hear about the things you were interested in. You hadn't yet decided where you were going to go, what you're going to do exactly, but you had some insight about what was important to you. And I think it's wonderful to just kind of see the next steps emerging for you, and I wish you all the best going forward. And congratulations on your commencement.
Thank you so much. And then to the flex time, I think that was something that I have maybe a little more bias towards because it really came from a program that we have at Hudson. That idea from Central Mass. I'm obviously from Central Mass, so I was more involved in their work. But yeah, I think I really agree with you that flex time is really important, especially like you mentioned with the increasing pressure and responsibilities that students face. I know at Hudson it was really helpful for me with a lot of the priorities and responsibilities that I have to have even an hour during the day just to get some work done. It was always really helpful. And so I'm glad that they recommended that, and I hope obviously that the board and the regions can take that into consideration. But yeah, thank you for your comment.
Dalida?
Thank you. I also want to give you your flowers and thank you for the way you have shown up. Such humbleness and so easy to interact with. This has been a joy. And I appreciate the recommendations. And I wanted to ask a question. This is, I guess, less for Isabella, but more for the board. What is the accountability process in terms of like the recommendations? Because, you know, as I mentioned in a previous meeting, I don't want it to feel like we just have a student just to have a student, and that the recommendation year after year, you know, there's these recommendations, but I also don't, for the past 2 years that I've been here, I don't think I've had a follow-up on the recommendations, and I don't know what the accountability looks like.
So first of all, our staff, you know, receive not only the presentation, the actual report itself, we actually go back and look at our current regs and guidelines, because we do have quite a bit around social and emotional learning. As Isabella said, as we're thinking about the new grad standards, it's the timeliness of this to look at best practices, because one of the things we are actually working with high schools now on, you would be surprised, board members, so the technical issues around scheduling. So there are schools like Isabella's High School that, do some really good practices. And by the way, still meet, high rigor in terms of mass core and other requirements. I think you guys either have a portfolio or capstone as well, I think, in your school. So, I mean, it's interesting like how these schools have these practices already, and yet they're also able to build, time in their block schedules that allow students to really, just, this flex time. So so I'm just using it as an example, board member, but in essence, what our goal is to take these recommendations, look at our current work right now, how it can be embedded, but more importantly for me, it's how do we also, I want to raise best practices, because that is the one thing that we can do as a state, because we get to see it all. I get to see it myself when we go to the schools. So I want to raise those best practices. And even right now, in partnership with the Secretary's office, we're actually working already with some high schools right now that are the farthest away, for example, in our mass core. We're actually working with them already starting this summer to look at their schedules and, again, giving them ideas of how to best, and looking, frankly, what the needs are around how they could even meet our requirements. So that's just an example. So this work does inform, what we do.
I also do want to mention one thing that I forgot to mention before is that the representatives in their regions, one of the things that we also task them with is bringing their final reports and the State Student Advisory Council's final reports back to their regions so that the regions themselves can take the students' recommendations into consideration. So it's not, this final report is not just coming to the board, it's also hopefully going back to every single region that the students, or every region that participates.
And then, Isabella, you said this, but I want to just repeat it. The level of engagement that they had across the different regions also, I think, is just something to highlight. I mean, these were students that were actually having convenings, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback about how thoughtful they were. So again, that also allows it to be also in the ether of those communities, so that when they go back to the superintendents or the district leaders, they also know it's not only is it a group of students, but there actually was an engagement effort to engage the community.
Dr. West.
I want to add my thanks to Isabella for her leadership over the course of the year and her contributions to our work. I actually was reflecting as you were talking back on your mid-year presentation, where I think you made a really important observation about the value of you all just not working independently as the student advisory councils, but actually sort of working with the commissioner and the chair to sort of understand in advance what issues are going to be on the decision-making agenda so that you can be prepared to represent student voices. And I saw the emphasis on two-way rather than one-way communication in your presentation here. And I hope that we can actually find ways to institutionalize that, because I think that could be your real legacy from your year here, less the sort of specific recommendations, but your philosophy or your intuition about how we can set up this process so that your successors can be as effective as possible. And I think that would be a really important contribution that you will have made if we can follow through on that recommendation in concrete ways.
Yeah, I know that my advisors, Samantha and Shaniqua, have been in communication with I think the commissioner and the chair on how to more involve the board in the regional meetings and the state meetings. I know they spoke about having board members at some of our meetings and maybe increasing the amount of reports that are given by the board member to you guys. So I know that that's definitely
Yeah, and I think there's a trick in finding the right balance. We want you all to be in the position to bring new issues, but if you also had a sense of what issues are going to be coming up, it would make it easier for you to do your job of trying to represent the student voices generally, rather than just trying to sort of offer your own opinion. So anyways, I think there are opportunities to build on what you've emphasized and strengthen the role of the student councils and the student board member that we're lucky to have.
Thanks, great point, Dr. West. Any other comments? Secretary's right.
Work together that long, but it's been a pleasure getting to know you and really impressed by these recommendations. I can assure to the question that member asked around, this is something we'll take back, and we're going to look at. Commissioner and I can talk more about this. We're you know, I think we need to just elevate a general student voice in everything we do. We don't do that enough in this state, and it's something that I think we can use our roles to help stress the importance of that. I think there are structures and systems that I think we can support districts with and think about. And then there's also ways, you know, I'm cognizant of, in my role, how can I more regularly hear from students about, not just at the K-12 level, but across. Even 4 and 5-year-olds have a voice, right? And, or 3-year-olds, right? We got to honor all those voices. One thing I was thinking about is we need to think about using the structures regionally that exist for superintendent convenings, principal convenings. There are roundtables. I would love to somehow think about how we pair the advisory groups up with the roundtables so that superintendents from those areas can hear directly from students. There's also principal sort of gatherings in each region of the state. I'm not sure to what extent that's happening, and that's something, you know, that I wouldn't expect the students to figure out. I think we've got to create the space so that sometimes those superintendent roundtables are, you know, it could be used more productively. Let's just say that. And one of the ways to use those times more productively is to hear directly from students about some regional concerns that might exist. And I think that we've got to figure out systems to support that. But I appreciate the clarity of and the themes that you see, because I think this is something we have to take very seriously as we think about this work moving ahead. While we may be fixated on the graduation recommendations, which are important, there's a whole lot of other things that young people are thinking about that we need to make sure we honor in our policies and our work moving forward. So thank you.
These are all great, and we do look forward to whoever your successor is going to be. Generally, this election seems a little late because we tend to know at this last meeting, no? Or
It's a little later this year. We had to do second round of regional elections, so it was a little pushed back.
A lot of interest.
But it's,
Yeah.
but they will be
Civics
elected.
in action.
Sometime this summer, they will be elected.
So-
And they will be here. I'll make sure to connect them with you guys.
as I know you're going to be busy with school next year, but we always invite you to come back because we just loved having you here this year. And best of luck in your college endeavors, but also making sure that we make the connectivity with your successor so that a lot of these ideas and thoughts don't just stay on the table. And so in September, when we meet again, I hope that as part of an agenda item, Commissioner, we can sort of introduce the new
Yes.
member to these concepts. Because as Dr. West points out, I think we've improved the process much better, so it's not just the student group reporting at the board once a year and then leaving and then coming back the next year. So having this sort of continuity as you go through different student leaders here is really important, I think, for your overall group and for the state as a whole. So thank you. Thanks for everything and best of luck. Mary Ann?
Yeah, thank you. I think, you know, listening to the comments from Member West and Secretary Zarek, and just, you know, understanding how students have taken this work so seriously and very focused throughout the year, meeting as they did for all that time, and really we get the benefit of that work. I feel moved to make a friendly motion that the board accept this report. And then just, you know, have it be reflected in the minutes that, you know, we accept the report based on what it is. That's it. So that would be, I move that we accept this report of the Student Advisory Committee.
And an informal vote, I would agree. So we will make sure that the record reports that the board accepted the report and that we will be moving forward in that way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Isabella. Okay, and I want to move on to our second agenda item, which is important to all of us. The civics education update. Now, I had asked for this because in 2015, just to rewind, the Board of Education had a very prominent role through a subcommittee of civics experts and leaders, and some folks that are here now and others that are not, but in having the legislature pass a civics requirement, which had been a requirement for many years and then had eroded. And I want to call out in particular the memory of David Roach, former superintendent of Milford Public Schools, who led this task force. And he was just a wonderful man. and he had a lot of patience, and he got this through the legislature and through the board. So I wanted to introduce two friends of mine, Louise Doobie, who's the CEO of iCivics, and Rob Waldron, who, as a man coming to this from other philanthropic pursuits and a passionate civics supporter of civics education, started the We Declare Challenge, which I think we're always looking for ways of engaging students and making sure that we can have student voices be heard. This is an amazing way, and Rob, through his own philanthropy, funded this initiative. Several of us were judges, so I will let them, actually, Commissioner, are there any other folks coming to the table?
No, well, we'll have an additional civics
Okay.
presentation afterwards, but I will just comment, I think, thank you, both of you for this wonderful initiative, and I got to see it firsthand at one of the winners, and I would just tell you the excitement that I saw, but of course the products that we got to judge. I kind of told Rob and Louise, I kind of wish all of them could be winners, but I know that's not possible, but the winner, the excitement was real, and more importantly, the knowledge that was gained and the learning, and it really also, I was very inspired also by the teachers that led these efforts. So I think you also made their day, because I think it made the subject even that much more exciting and interesting.
So on this 250th anniversary of the country, this is our last meeting of the year, and so this won't be the last time we talk about civics, but it certainly is the last meeting before July 4th. So I think it's really important that we learn about this and other initiatives in the department, and that we as a board keep a close eye on the outcomes, because the test results after 10 years of civics education are not good. So this is a place where we need to strengthen and use alternative strategies to really make sure students are educated in the three branches of government and the importance of each. So I will let you guys take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start us off and then turn it over to Rob to talk about the challenge specifically. Thank you so much for having us and for focusing on civic education, which is greatly exemplified by your student member. So thank you for your work. I lead iCivics, and it's a privilege, and we really believe that the goal of schooling is to graduate informed and engaged citizens. It is not an addition onto the plate, it is actually the plate. We are the largest civic education provider in the nation, 80% of counties, including 88% of Massachusetts district. I don't know that I need to tell you too much about why civics is important right now. Our young people are failing to see the benefits of a liberal democracy. They're stopping believing to some degree. Someone has to make a case for democracy immediately. That is incredibly important, and not only that, it is also good for students in that they gain not employable skills such as critical thinking and communications and vote. So those civic education actually delivers for students. I'm also here as a representative of the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition, where iCivics is one of 3 founding members. We have been supporting the 2018 civics law. We've advocated for an increase in the Project Trust Fund from $1.5 to $2.5 million. Still not enough. And we have supported the showcases across the Commonwealth, which are held annually in 4 different sites. I want to thank DESE for their support in all of this work. They have been alongside. They have clearly prioritized civics, and I'm deeply appreciative of that. As Catherine points out, it's a long process here in Massachusetts. We've had, and I just want to focus on this because no useful change in education comes quickly. It's a long road, and we need to sustain our commitment to it. In the Massachusetts legislature had set up a special commission on civic learning, which issued a report in 2012. And then Higher Ed came along with a report, and then DESE created a strategic plan. which culminated in an enormous amount, a flurry of activity in 2018 that included the revision of the history and social science framework along with the civics law and the creation of the civics trust fund. So all of this in 1 year was really because of all of the investments that have been made over the course of time. Since then, we've been in an implementation mode. And we all know, anybody who's spent 2 minutes in education will know that implementation is where things get hard. And so this is the place where we need to do more and invest more. That is what the hard work is. So in that frame, I wanted to mention a few things which we think are really important. First, the Massachusetts Civic Learning Coalition wants to support the civic readiness competencies that are enunciated in the Graduating Council report that issued last week. We just hope that that has a tangible benefits to students, not simply a general commitment. It needs to be reflected in real life. The second thing, and I think one of the most important things that could happen, is an investment in educators, professional development of educators. The gap between the investment in educators in math, ELA, STEM, and history and civics is massive and needs to be closed. This work is important and needs to be, educators need to be supported within it. In the 2018 civics law, there was a commitment to voter and pre-voter registration in high school campuses. That has yet to be the reality in districts in the Commonwealth. That is actually one of the easiest things to do. We hope that there is significant progress in pre-voter and voter registration within districts. And then I want to address a little bit what you mentioned before about the achievement rate, student proficiency on the MCAS grade 8 civics. It is not where we need it to be. So continued investments in that are really important. Should there be, and of course history and social science exam, as is the case from the new Mass Core, that wouldn't need civics items in it. History is important. History is taught for the purpose of civics. So we need to ensure that there is representation of civics within those. The last thing I'll mention is that the National Association Governing Board, NAGB, announced a month or so ago that they would make available state-level results on civics for grade 8, so the NAEPS civics test for grade 8. This is a voluntary test, as you all know. We hope that the Commonwealth will volunteer to be one of those, so we have an idea of how Massachusetts, which has done so much work in civics, compares to other states. And we can actually proceed to make investments where they're needed. The grade 12 exam will not come out till 2032, which is too bad, but at least for this purpose, it would be very helpful. And we are right now at America's 250th anniversary. This is an enormous opportunity for all of us to focus on civics, as Rob has, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the challenge. And here you go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your service to our Commonwealth, and good to see friends here. And I hope we all know that the woman to my left is one of the great civics leaders in the United States and has done enormous things for our Commonwealth and for our country. I'm a retired guy, and I was CEO of Curriculum Associates up until a year and a half ago. And in the winter, I started complaining about not enough stuff happening for the 250th with K-12. I was 11 at the bicentennial, and we painted every fire hydrant, we reenacted Henry Knox, we rang the bell for the Minutemen to come, and so forth. And I didn't see enough of that, and so my wife told me to get off the couch and do something rather than just moan about it. And so I came up with an idea for to give kids agency, to unfortunately meet them where they are, which is the phone, and get them to do videos based on the first 2 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. It was a little bit of a trick to get them to read, but it worked, and I asked Louise to manage it and project manage it with her great team at iCivics. And oh, sorry, I have the slides here. And so it went much better than I thought. We had over 2,100 students participate, 1,700 when you include some of them you'll see in a second, 44 districts. My family and Fidelity decided to give $2,500 each student who participated and won, and then the submissions were so good we moved that to 3 schools instead of 1. And I asked some friends over at the Boston Pops if we could play the winning video at the July 4th concert, and all 3 schools who won now are going to be going to the rehearsal and the private showing the day before. And we had very famous judges, including Catherine Craven and Pedro Martinez, but also the governor and Mayor Wu and Keith Lockhart and CEOs of large companies who wanted to join in. So that worked out great. I'm going to show you now just one of the winning videos. This is from Boston Green Academy.
Which have held them to a separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Para garantizar estos derechos, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Y felicidad. Y felicidad.
And that was, and we'll send around some others, but that was done entirely by 8th graders with their the students there using their iPhone. And they learned to edit and so forth, and people worked really hard to make great ones. And there were so many; it was so hard to judge and leave some on the table. But we got a lot of kids involved. I did some math last night, so if we make this national, which I've been asked to do by another governor, I'll leave unnamed, and the leader of Monticello, Luis, is on the board of the Thomas Jefferson Foundation. And do multiple grades. If we just do the same thing we did here, add 8 grades, add 50 states, it would be 1.3 million kids. So we're going to try that next, and that's what I have for today.
That's amazing.
Amazing.
Dr. Grant?
Short of accountability, I love civics more than anything else. And Louise, thank you so much for being here. And wanted to underscore Rob's comment. You are probably one of the most humble citizens in our country in terms of the work you do across the country. It's true. She single-handedly helped me revise the social studies standards in Washington, D.C. And you are the secret sauce across many states. And so thank you for your work across the country, particularly.
She's also a pretty good fundraiser.
Yeah, seriously. And
She's also trying to avoid her flowers.
I know. Which I'm like, no, but I mean, I hope everyone is grounded in the voices of our children. Like the children embody the documents when they read them and they understand them, and they understand that even when those words were written, they were not written for me, but they are written for us now. And I think that is the moment that's before us, and that's why we audibly give you your flowers, because at a time where it would be easy to not talk about civics, you are making sure it's forefront at the conversation. That's the only way democracy survives. All of that to say, how do we actually shift from like the recommendation of this work with NATB to like what is our role to making sure that we do participate in this, so that we actually can have an apples to apples conversation about civics performance across the country, because it's mission critical that, like, as much as I talk about end of year assessments, I actually want one for civics as well, because students believe when they actually embody the language and understand their role in it, particularly in a place like Massachusetts, which was mission critical to the existence of this country.
Can just maybe I could put these together at some point and share them. But one of the things that was the most joyous, but also surprised me, was the number of. I was on the phone with a teacher yesterday who said, 20 years of teaching, this is the most difficult 8th grade class I've ever had. And like, I could not engage them. And then they did this project, and I finally got through, and they started working together and got out of their shells or whatever. And so there's a ton of research on project-based learning, and I know there's debates about that. But in this case, when you get actually getting them to read using an original document and engage them in a project, and in this case a contest, it seemed to work better than I'd ever hoped.
Dr. West?
Yeah, I'd love to pick up on what Christina was talking about. First, great to see you, Rob. Congrats on the momentum.
Thank
and Luis, thank you so much for being here. So when I'm not at this table, I'm often at the National Assessment Governing Board table, where I serve as the representative or in the seat for a state school board member that is on that board. And creating this opportunity for states to get state level data in civics has been my pet project there, and I'm glad to be where we are. So just to make sure that everyone understands, the National Assessment of Educational Progress is given every 2 years in math and reading in grades 4 and 8, and states are required to participate in that. Those are the mandatory assessments. The NAEP is also given in other subjects, but it's not required that states participate, but we can give them the opportunity to. And so that's what my colleagues on the National Assessment Governing Board have decided to do. And so states will have the opportunity to opt in to participating in the 8th grade civics assessment in 2028. And I think it's very important, because when the NAEP is given and you only get a single data point nationwide and maybe some subgroup data, it doesn't really generate a lot of conversation. It's hard for states to see themselves in the data and hard for them to use it. They wonder whether they're represented or not. But when we get state level information, we begin to be able to compare what we're doing to what's happening in other states and to learn from it. So I'm very hopeful that Massachusetts will take advantage of this opportunity. I'm hoping we'll get at least a couple dozen states in the first round, and that this will build momentum over time. It's entirely free for states because it's a sample-based exam. It's only, a relatively small number of students who essentially spend about one class period taking the exam, so not very burdensome. I know we have some competing commitments. We have our own 8th grade civics test. We have, I believe, science testing in 8th grade. We'll have the NAEP in math and reading, so there's a little bit of clutter that we'll need to make sure that we navigate, but I really think it's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss. My understanding is that states have been asked to indicate an informal expression of interest by next month, and then in January of 2027, they'll be asked to formally commit to participating. And so I would love for us as a board, I don't think it's our decision to make on our own, but if we as board members could express strong interest in that, I think that would be useful to send a signal to the commissioner.
Yeah, and I think to Members West's point, again, we're Massachusetts. I think people really want to understand where we fit in the nation and how they compare. So I think there's, again, we have a higher responsibility than other states. And so I've already expressed, Member West, as long as there's support of the board, I'm definitely interested in participating.
And I will say the eighth grade, the fact that the assessment is being given at eighth grade actually aligns very well with our civic standards, the sort of cornerstone of which is a required eighth grade course that we've put a lot of effort into. And so I think it sort of, the measurement aligns well with our approach to teaching, and that's not always the case. And so I think, anyways, we're particularly well suited to participate.
I'll just say that couldn't agree more. And I think it's a win-win for Massachusetts. Massachusetts will do well, and I think the NAEP state results will be a lever for our nation to invest more in civic education. That's really, if you want to do service to your nation, this is it.
That's exactly right.
We could take an informal, Marianne started at this meeting, an informal poll of the board. But, I get the sense of the board, I think for the record, Commissioner, that the board would be interested in you expressing that informal interest in pursuing this further. I see nothing but nods and thank you. So it's an informal, because it wasn't on the agenda, but we are making sure that we are solidly behind you in
And
this.
I'll also add a good mix of states has expressed interest so far across the partisan spectrum geographically, and so I think we would be joining a movement.
Awesome. Well, this has been super meaningful for me and Commissioner Martinez, I know, to participate in the judging. I think one of the things, Rob in particular, I give you a shout out for your former work, which was devising curricular ways to sort of deliver content to kids, becomes even more important in this day and age, and sort of this gamesmanship and the competition and honestly the cash rewards that come at the end of it for some of the students. But there was a seriousness of intent with, like, we spend billions of dollars trying to get results, literally billions of dollars trying to get results from kids, and $2,500 on a contest gets you sort of a lot of participation. So sometimes people become nose blind to the old methodologies of getting results, and I think Rob and Louise have shown us that there are alternative methodologies to getting an eighth grader to read the Declaration of Independence. And understanding it is the next step. And I think one of the things I will say is, like, a shout out to the Orenberger School in West Roxbury, because that was one of the semifinalists as well. And what they did was so inventive. It was a split screen, and they had a student of all diverse backgrounds dressed up in period Revolutionary War clothing on one side of the split screen, and then a student in modern clothes holding up signs about what each phrase of the Declaration meant to them in today's sort of modern world. And it's that kind of next level of curiosity and learning that we all strive to impart to kids today. So kudos to Rob Waldron and Louise Doobie for coming up with this and managing this. And I think there's more to come on civics.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Board Chair, so we're going to continue this conversation on civics. So as the nation approaches July 4th, 2026, the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, we have an opportunity to reflect on the importance of civic knowledge, civic engagement, and our shared democratic values at a time when civic discourse is increasingly polarized and public confidence in democratic institutions is under strain. High-quality civics education is more important than ever. Massachusetts has made a significant set of investments in strengthening civics teaching and learning, and today's discussion provides an opportunity to review our progress and consider how we can continue to prepare our students for informed and engaged participation in civic life. I'd like to welcome to the table Erin Hashimoto Martel, our Senior Associate Commissioner of Teaching and Learning, phenomenal leader, and Rebecca Judson, History and Social Science Specialist. Again, thank you. Small team, but mighty team.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Good morning, board members. So we're excited to really build off of the previous presentation and really talk about, in many cases, what the department has been able to do as a result of what Louise's work with iCivics and their coalition here in Massachusetts, what they have really provided as resources and support to allow us to really further this civic education work in Massachusetts. So I'll talk a little briefly about what that history has been and what we are doing now, and then I'll hand it over to Rebecca, who oversees our civics work here at the department, and she'll give you a lot more details on what's kind of progress update on what we've been doing very recently. So we have a history and social science curriculum framework that really helps to outline the civic capacity for students learning from kindergarten through high school. Specific to civics, it focuses on three pillars. One is around civic knowledge, so those elements around understanding what is government, what is history, economics, geography, those elements. The other is civic skills, so really helping students to develop the skills around analyzing issues, evaluating evidence, making arguments, participating effectively in the civic processes. And then third is civic dispositions. So those values and behaviors that support democratic participation, including respect for others, civil discourse, listening to different perspectives, and this commitment to equality. So all those three have really been built out in our curriculum frameworks. What you'll also see throughout our presentation today are pictures from our recent civic showcases, which were mentioned earlier. They're really a great regional events that showcase the work that students have been doing around their projects. So you'll see those sprinkled throughout as well. All right. So Massachusetts really established this strong foundation for civics education through significant policy and legislative actions, as was mentioned, which really kicked off in 2018. So in June 2018 is when the board adopted our revised history and social science curriculum framework, which had strengthened civics education across grade levels and increased that emphasis on inquiry, critical thinking, civic engagement, so it was much more bolstered in the recent frameworks. That same year, legislature enacted the Act to Promote and Enhance Civic Engagement. So among those provisions, the law required all public high schools and schools that included in 8th grade to provide at least one student-led, nonpartisan civics project for every student, which students often do local showcases, and then certain student projects are selected to be shown at these regional showcases. The legislation also established the Civics Trust Fund, which created a dedicated source for supporting civics education initiatives throughout the Commonwealth. And so really together, all these things has created the foundation for what guides our work today. So as already been highlighted, so I'll kind of briefly talk about this. So in 2025, we administered our first statewide grade 8 civics MCAS assessment. So what that shows is that we have 39% of our students who met or exceeded expectations. This is providing us the important baseline for understanding student achievement related to civics and helping us measure future progress related to our efforts. The results also suggest definitely that need for investment and continued support for even more opportunities for civic engagement education through curriculum implementation and professional learning and educator supports and resources. So what's also up here, which has been talked about, which is to just hold both at the same time, is the 2022 NAEP grade 8 civics national data. Again, it's national, not specific to our state, but it does kind of just give us all those different pictures to help us see what's going on. So we built a strong foundation in Massachusetts, but definitely have challenges, things that we need to improve and continue to work on related to that. All right, so with that, I will hand it over to Rebecca, who will talk really specifically about what we've been doing at the department related to civics.
Thank you, Erin, and good morning. So as Erin mentioned, despite the need for continued investment, the Civics Project Trust Fund has enabled DESE to provide significant grant support for civics education statewide. From FY 2021 through FY 2026, approximately $6 million in civics teaching and learning grants has been awarded to districts and schools. So this represents 232 grants to 120 individual districts, charters, and collaboratives. The activities that these grants support are quite varied. They include civics professional development for educators, curriculum implementation, support for the student-led civics project and local civics project showcases, field trips, and other experiential learning opportunities. The grants are highly competitive each year. To give you a sense, over the past 3 years, we've received an average of 85 applications per grant cycle, reflecting strong interest from districts and schools across Massachusetts. And crucially, knowing that civics education and the civics project can be particularly locally focused, these grants help expand access to high quality civics education while supporting districts and schools to draw upon their local communities and implement in ways that best meet their needs. So in addition to grant funding, DESE also provides direct instructional support through curriculum and resource development, so I'll talk through a few of the examples that are on the slides. Our Civics Project Guidebook and digital resources support educators who are facilitating the student-led civics project in the classroom. So the guidebook outlines 6 stages of the civics project, from examining self and civic identity to investigating an issue, all the way through taking action, reflection, and showcasing, and then provides materials and guidance to support educators through each of those stages. In addition, DESE's Investigating History curriculum is openly available for grades 3 through 7 and is fully aligned to the 2018 History and Social Science curriculum framework. And this curriculum includes civic engagement and current world relevance as one of its 4 key instructional principles and provides a strong history and social science background to students before they enter the grade 8 civics course. DESE also maintains the History and Social Science Curricular Materials Guide, which helps districts and schools select instructional materials. And this guide, which we are actually expanding and revising for next school year, includes recommendations for grade 8 civics core, as well as supplementary materials on the student-led civics project, on media literacy, as well as curricula for other grade levels that include a focus on civics, knowing that civics is a through line across our framework K-12. At the same time, DESE continues to build educator capacity through professional learning. So our Civics Pathways initiative focuses on both civics content and instructional practice. And after 2 successful years, we are rebranding and expanding this initiative as Teaching for Civic Empowerment. And we will be offering courses through that initiative through our partners, Generation Citizen and Primary Source. As Erin already mentioned earlier, DESE also supports civics education through direct civic action, real-world civic action. So as she mentioned, you've been seeing photographs from our civics project showcases throughout the slides. And these are legislatively required events that are currently offered for the 4th year in a row and currently in partnership with Generation Citizen. And as you can likely tell from the photos, the showcases provide students with an opportunity to present their projects and receive feedback from their peers, from educators, from community members. They share projects on a wide range of topics that are most important to them and their communities. I'll share a few examples from the recent events, including projects on a municipal composting program, immigrant rights and safety, lowering the local voting age, and financial literacy. And just to give you a sense of numbers, you can see on the slide we welcomed 1,150 8th grade and high school student presenters, as well as 33 student leaders who helped facilitate the events this year. I'll note that this is only a fraction of students who completed the student-led civics project across the state, many of whom presented their projects in local showcases prior to these events. We also welcomed over 300 local community advisors. So these were educators, members of community organizations, legislators, and others who lent their subject matter expertise and shared feedback with students on their projects. And thank you so much to Commissioner Martinez and to Secretary Reich for attending the events, and we would welcome members of the board to attend in the future. So just to close out, I want to highlight 2 aspects of the why of this work. As Erin mentioned earlier, through the foundation that Massachusetts is building, students are gaining the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to prepare them for the future, as well as indirectly to strengthen the health of their communities and our democracy through their participation. But also crucially, we know that a unique feature of this work is that students are also valued as community members now, that it values their perspective and offers them an opportunity to engage in this learning through real-world participation today. And I'll just share a little bit of background about the image that's on our last slide. These students are from Chicopee Public Schools, and I encountered them at our showcase in Springfield. They were advocating for some additional funding and programming for youth sports. And when I encountered them, they were deep in conversation with one of their state legislators who was telling them about funding streams that she was advocating for that could potentially support their work. So this is learning for the future, but it's also action and learning for now. So we're grateful for the opportunity to share updates about this work. As has been mentioned, we know there is significant work to do and look forward to continuing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments from the board members? Very good. Go ahead.
Quick comment or share an idea. So I think it's great and an important milestone that we now have the 8th grade MCAS civics. And I'm always interested in ways we can be sort of using that data in constructive and positive ways. So I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity to, for example, use that data to identify particular districts or schools that are performing very well in civics, perhaps relative to expectations based on other subjects or based on demographics, and use that as an opportunity to, I don't know, recognize that accomplishment, because I think just the more often we're basing decisions, including positive decisions, on the objective measures that we have of achievement, I think it's an opportunity not just to call attention to the value of civics, but also to call attention to the value of the data as a tool.
Yeah, so Member West, to your point, the way I like to think about it is we use the data as a great indicator to look underneath it and really identify practices. And I think that's what the team, is really strong in knowing what those best practices are. It's great when we can show it in student work, and I'll tell you, being there and just hearing, I can't help it. There was there were high school and middle school students. I couldn't help but the middle school students just kind of tugged at my heart because they were just very thoughtful about the type of things they were identifying. And so, but I do think, Member West, to your point, there is a great, not just in this, but in many ways, to look at the performance of our schools. Underneath that, to really look at best practices, lift those up for everyone. And then the other component is, and I've been to multiple professional development sessions that different departments have done, by the way. In every single case, standing room only, every single case. Many of them, you could literally hear a pin drop when they're listening to some of our teacher experts in the field. And and for me, it was a real, again, just learning in my first year, another example as we build our strategic plan of really incorporating these types of convenings, lifting the best practices driven by the data, and then really making sure that we share that across the field. I think there is a huge opportunity for us to do that. So, but I agree with you. We'll start with the data, but I just want to make sure that we go underneath it and really uncover the practices behind the data, because that's what drives the data.
Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you so much for sharing your great work with us, and more to come. And I do think that having an annual check-in on the topic is really important. So thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, amendments to regulations on special education to conform to state law. Commissioner Martinez will introduce the agenda item.
Yep. Our next agenda item concerns a proposed amendments to the Commonwealth Special Education Regulations. Earlier this year, the board voted to solicit public comment on regulatory changes necessary to implement the requirements of the Protection Education Equity Act. The department received feedback from a broad range of stakeholders, including educators, families, advocates, and community members. Public engagement is an important part of the regulatory process, and the feedback we received has informed several recommended revisions to the proposed amendments. Today's discussion will provide an opportunity to review the public comments, consider the recommended changes, and discuss the proposed regulations prior to the final action of the board. I also want to take a moment to mention last week's announcement that the federal government is moving the oversight of special education and civil rights out of the Department of Education. That was just announced recently, board members. This dismantling of the Department of Education continues to be concerning. This is why it is even all that much more important that here in Massachusetts, we maintain strong laws, regulations to ensure that all of our students, including those with disabilities, receive the best education opportunities possible. I would like to welcome to the table Rob Curtin, our Deputy Commissioner. I don't know if Rob is, oh, yep, he's on the
I'm
screen.
over here, Commissioner.
A little scary, sorry, Rob. So, big screen here. And then Jamie Camacho, our Acting State Director of Special Education, and Joe Wakeland from our DESE Legal Office.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Good morning, board members. Good to be with you again. Sorry I couldn't join you in person today. So we are going to walk through the slides here. Helene, if you could start us, and I can't see the slides right now, Helene. There we go. So again, members of the board, joined by Jamie Camacho, Acting State Director of Special Education, and Joe Wakeland, Associate General Counsel from our legal office. Next slide, please. As the commissioner said, we're here today about proposed amendments to the regulations on special education. You remember back in February, the board voted to release proposed regulations for public comment. That public comment ran from the end of February through April 24th. And again, there are two sets of regulations coming before you today, and they are prompted, as the commissioner said, by the passage of the Protect Education Equity Act, passed in August of 2025. As it relates to the special education regulations, the general purpose and what we've done here in the regulations is to align state and federal law in these regulations to be really clear. That there is not any sort of distinction or daylight between the two. And that's what we've done as it's gone through here as we go through the regulations. Next slide, please. So a reminder that when we put these out for public comment back in February, there were two main things that we were looking to do. The first was to amend the definition of an individualized education program, and you can see the definition there. The underlined portion is what we were changing. Again, this is all about the alignment between state and federal law. And what we did was to include a reference to the new state law. So you see there in the alignment with federal and state special education law. And that adopts the language from federal law regarding the consideration of the language needs of English learners, and requires the participation of an individual with knowledge of the differences between the student's special education and language needs or submission of their report. So that was the first thing that we had put out. Next slide, please, Helene. And then also, again, to align between state and federal law, we had asked to add a new section around the discipline procedures for eligible students. And what we did here was simply to incorporate the discipline provisions that were already in the IDEA. So again, just trying to make sure that we were completely aligned between our state and federal law within our regulations. Next slide, please, Helene. As the commissioner said, we received a fair amount of public comment. We received 14 written submissions, primarily from advocacy organizations and from individuals that were supporting the positions of the advocacy organizations. Three of the most frequently cited areas that we heard about were the need to include more specific language in the consideration of English learners with disabilities, the need to ensure consistency and clarity in the application of state and federal law, and we were asked to provide some more clear definitions for specific terms, which we have done. Next slide, Helene. So I'm going to briefly here walk through, I think, 7 major changes here that we have made. The first was to include English as a second language educators to the list of staff that were explicitly required to be trained in the requirements of special education. This was really done just to, as you know, in some ways to be overly explicit, because it was already required for all staff anyway, but we were explicit about including English as second language educators. We included language directly from state and federal law requiring the consideration of English learners' needs in the IEP development process. We streamlined the definition of change in placement. That was something that we heard about in the in public comment, to make sure again that there was consistent application between the state discipline law and the alignment with the language of the IDA statute. Fourth, we added definitions that you see in the proposed regulations for some of the terms in the discipline regulations: controlled substance, illegal drugs, serious bodily injury, and weapon. And what we did here was take the definitions directly from IDEA, again, so that we have consistency. Next slide, please. The fifth one was we amended some of the language regarding the notice requirements, again, directly from the IDA statute, and to clarify that notices must also comply with existing state discipline law requirements. So again, much of this is just to make sure that we are very much aligned between our state and federal statute. The next one was we inserted some language regarding the appeal of a placement as the result of a disciplinary decision. We did this to clarify the instances in which a district may move to keep a student in an interim alternative education placement. This was again in response to the public comment. And lastly, we added a reference to state law regarding the transmission of student records to law enforcement officials to make sure that we were providing clarity and consistency with the law. Again, so these changes were all made roughly to make sure that we were having alignment between state and federal law. We use the law in a lot of places to within the regulatory language, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have. And Joe and Jamie are also here with us to add any more detail that might be necessary.
Commissioner Rennie?
No, so again, Board members, please, our team is here, and again, thank you, Rob, for presenting, and we have our two experts here also with us. Again, I really believe that I want to thank the team for just taking the public feedback. I really like when we see that feedback and it's incorporated in the actual regs, and so that's one of the things that helps me see how strong the process is.
I can't agree more that I think it was a great addition that you start to show us specifically what things were considered and rejected, what things were put in after public comment, because it gives us all more information about what we're voting on. So I really appreciate that work. Any questions before we go to a vote? If not, do I hear a motion? Yes. Helene has to take a roll call. I have a motion and a second, I believe. Kind of, if not. Thank you. I'm looking around. Thank you, Helene.
Okay. All righty. Member Chamberlain? Member Fisher? Yes. Member Grant? Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Member Hasha?
Yes.
Member Smitty?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
Secretary's right?
Yes.
Unanimous vote, motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, members.
Thanks, Rob. Next up is agenda item 4, new regulations for interpretation and translation services in schools. Before Commissioner Martinez, I just wanted you to make sure you clarify, because there's been a lot of discussion about what goes into regs and what goes into guidance relative to this topic.
Yep. And so we'll definitely that'll be part of the presentation, Board Chair. So our next agenda item concerns the proposed adoption of regulations governing interpretation and translation services in schools. The board voted earlier this year to solicit public comment on these proposed regulations, which are intended to support meaningful communication between schools and families and ensure that language is not a barrier to participation in a student's education. Based on the feedback during the comment period, the department has incorporated several recommended revisions into the final regulations before today. The discussion will provide an opportunity to review the proposed changes and consider the regulations for final adoption. I want to welcome to the table Lauren Wu, our amazing Deputy Commissioner, Deborah Steenland, our Senior Deputy General Counsel. And so, board members, so one of the things that we heard loud and clear, again, on both sides, of course, there's no money attached to this, and so that's always a concern, right, for our districts, because we know, I love the diversity of our state, but multiple languages spoken, especially in our largest schools and districts. And so we heard some of the public comment as well. So one of the things I'll ask the team to differentiate is what's in the regs. What are some things that we also we'll always clarify in guidance, because the one thing we want to make sure is that we're very strategic about what's in regs, because we know things can change. And with technology, for example, that continues to evolve in this area, we want to be nimble so that we're very responsive to districts. I will also say on the record, this is not intended in any way to create a significant financial burden to any of our districts. And so that's one of the things that I just want to put out there, that we will assure through our regs and through our guidance that we, again, are listening to any unintended consequences. And that's where the guidance, again, I will make sure that it's adjusted for that. With that, we're balancing, making sure that our children truly, that their needs are being met. And we know because, being an immigrant myself, being somebody who translated for my parents when I was in elementary school, because there wasn't any translators in my home school in Chicago, I understand how important this issue is, and especially in today's world where we have, more students on IEPs and other circumstances that exist in today's context. So with that, I'll ask the team to present.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Chair Craven, Secretary Zreich, and board members. As the Commissioner said, today we're presenting the final proposed regulatory actions to implement the requirements of the Protect Education Equity Act, and at the end of the presentation, we'll be soliciting your vote to adopt the regulations. Also, as the Commissioner said, my name is Lauren Wu, and today I'm joined by my colleague Deb Steenland, Senior Deputy General Counsel. There we go. Okay, great. As a reminder to the board, and as Rob mentioned, the Protect Education Equity Act was signed by Governor Healy on August 5th, 2025. The act provides state-level protections for historically marginalized students and promotes the consistent implementation of equity, access, and inclusion across districts. In addition to the special education regulations that you just discussed, the act required the board to promulgate regulations establishing standards for interpretation and translation services in schools. We brought those regulations to the board in February, and you voted to send them out to public comment for a 60-day period from February 25th to April 24th. So before we review the changes that we made as a result of public comment, let me remind the board what was sent out for feedback. So the regulations establish tiered qualifications for interpretation services for non-specialized settings, such as parent-teacher conferences, open houses, and other general education matters, and for specialized settings, such as special education meetings, discipline hearings, and other specialized matters. Both types of interpreters require demonstrated proficiency in English and another language, as determined by DESE, along with completion of a DESE-approved training course on terms, the roles of an interpreter, ethics, and confidentiality. We established schools translator qualifications for written translation, requiring written proficiency and understanding of ethics, confidentiality, and terminology. We included an additional provision which provides an experience-based pathway via superintendent or executive director endorsement. And we also included a provision regarding the use of machine translation so long as it was reviewed by a trained translator. And finally, to allow districts adequate time to come into compliance, we proposed an effective date of September 1st, 2027. So when we sent out these regulations, we received 41 written submissions, either through email or the posted survey. The most frequently cited areas in the public comment were the financial and workforce implications of the new qualified standards, as the Commissioner mentioned, the need for greater definitional clarity around certain terms and titles, disagreement over the legacy provisions, and machine translation review requirement, which we heard about during public comment today. So now we'll review the changes we made as a result of public comment, the version that's in front of you for adoption today. To start, we updated the titles of the tiered interpreters to be clearer. Previously, we used the terms general education interpreter and advanced interpreter, and we heard public comment that the titles could inadvertently restrict an interpreter from certain settings based on the title alone. So we updated the titles to education interpreter and advanced education interpreter, which now allows the specific qualifications to distinguish the roles, not the titles. To allow for greater pathways into the tiers of interpreters, we added two new provisions. The first, we modified the legacy provision to also allow for advanced education interpreters to qualify if they have been serving in the role of an interpreter and whose primary responsibility has been to provide interpretation in specialized settings. We believe this approach maintains standards while valuing practical experience, current workforce realities, and minimizing the disruption to districts' existing capacities. The second pathway allows for interpreters who have been trained and qualified in non-school settings to satisfy the training requirements for the tiers. For example, someone who may have been certified as a court or hospital interpreter could now qualify as an education or advanced education interpreter. Another change we made was to specify a new exemption for multilingual communication applications used for informational, non-specialized notifications from the translator review requirement. So whereas the previous version of the regulations required all machine translation to be reviewed by a trained interpreter, this updated provision now allows for non-specialized communications to be exempt from that review. We think this will be much more practical for school districts to implement. And as the commissioner mentioned, what we plan to include in guidance is how machine translations should be reviewed when those specialized communication documents are put out. We also made updates to the waiver provision, making it less broad. With this change, we specified that the waiver could only be submitted by a district superintendent or executive director and would be effective for no longer than 1 school year. And finally, we did receive comments that the regulations should be in effect immediately, and other comments requesting that they be delayed until 2028. As a result, we made no changes to the implementation date of September 1st, 2027. Where we didn't make specific changes as a result of public comment, we do believe we can address through guidance. So for example, what information needs to be submitted as part of the waiver process, we would specify in guidance and before we release that availability for superintendents or executive directors to submit that waiver. And lastly, before we get into discussion and questions from the board, we did want to be explicit that there's one additional technical amendment that was made following the board mailing last week. You can see the amendment here on the screen and added in the yellow highlight. To avoid any doubt that the legacy amendment we made regarding advanced education interpreters is in fact a legacy provision, we added that the provision would apply to individuals employed prior to the effective date of these regulations. And we mirrored that language in both sections of the educational interpreter legacy provision and now in the advanced education interpreter legacy provision. The intent is to support districts who rely on experienced staff who may not have formal credentials, but it is now clear that these individuals need to have been employed before September 1st, 2027 for the legacy provision to apply. So that's all for our presentation today. We're happy to answer any questions you have, and we hope that the board chooses to adopt the regulations today. Chair Craven, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hills.
Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
A question, and it touches on legal, but I'd actually like to kind of get an answer from you on this rather than a technical legal question. So there's regulations, understand what those are, and there are some things that you're going to deal with through guidance. What the commissioner said, the intent is not to put, meaningful, significant, whatever adjective was, additional costs. So let's say there are situations you become aware of and there's challenges from families, from advocacy groups, based on the regulations. What does it mean to a district for you to issue guidance to clarify, to the intent that the commissioner just suggested, if the actual legally binding regulation says something different?
Yeah, so we always have our complaint process through PRS if there's any issues with the interpretation or translation that's happening. And so school districts always have the opportunity to do that. Families always have the opportunity to do that. But I think at the very basic level, the regulations specify the standards and qualifications that the school interpreters or translators need to have in order to be employed as an interpreter or translator, whether using a staff member as the interpreter translator or whether using a vendor. Anybody who does interpretation who's put in the role of an interpreter needs to have now these minimum standards and qualifications and demonstrated skills in order to be asked to be an interpreter. You can no longer ask your bilingual staff member to come in to fill the role of an interpreter for any setting. It will now, as of September 1st, 2027, have to be a trained individual who now holds the title of an education interpreter or an advanced education interpreter, depending on the type of meeting that they might be interpreting. And so that at the very basic level will need to be in place for all school districts.
So what happens, and I'm making this up, and I don't want to just, it's always a little dangerous for me anyway to refer to comments from public comments, but I want to understand. I'm not challenging. I'm comfortable with your judgment, but I want to understand. So you put these out, regulations are approved, there's an interpretation that has some merits, whether in the courts or otherwise, and there's a very significant cost that's not what you intended. And you put out guidance saying, no, this is what you want to do, not the more literal extreme interpretation.
So
what does that actually mean in terms of how it plays out?
So I think the short answer, board member, is we're not going to put out guidance that is in contradiction to the regulations or the law. That's the simple answer. What I was getting at earlier is there's current practices happening today, and that's why we were very clear in the regs about separating. I get it. Look, districts send a lot of information out to parents, and again, diversity here in this state looks very different than even in the other states I've been in. I mean, in terms of the number of languages, large populations. So we want to make sure we're very clear in separating the practices, especially around students with IEPs, where it really gets into the rights of students, especially for multilingual and special ed. Separating that, there's a lot of communication that goes out to families. So how do we balance that approach to make sure that that information is clearly in the language of the family so that they understand it and they can participate, and not making it so onerous on the districts where you have to have, trained and qualified interpreters for every single word. So that's what we're trying to sort of balance. And we feel we can sort of achieve that not only through the language, but also in the regs, but also through additional guidance. And frankly, the other component is, everything that we do in the agency has to be in the spirit of, we're gonna learn with the field. This shouldn't be, and I feel like you would hold this value. We don't just put up regs and say, good luck, everyone. We'll see you later. No, the goal is we work with our districts to implement these regs. And again, our guidance becomes a huge support, and we learn. And if there's a situation where we have to go back and change the regs, as long as it doesn't counter the law, we will always have that conversation with the board. So I think that should be just our values in terms of the way we work. But the goal is we uphold the law. The regs mirror the law in terms of the best way to implement it. The guidance just gives more granular details to make sure that it's implemented well, and that again we try to minimize where we can unintended consequences.
So I would just, one last follow-up to that. I think that kind of construct as to how to think of regs and guidance works well. I would just say if there are either unintended consequences or consequences that kind of materialize from rapid changes in technology or otherwise, and you are in a situation of conflict or potentially litigious situation that guidance is not dealing with, there may be situations where you want to come back and quickly change some regs to reflect what it is you actually mean, whether that's through a normal 60-day process or through an emergency and then a 60-day, you'll figure that out. But don't let things kind of manifest, build up, get problematic. So you're intending this to be something, and hopefully which is not something that's going to add material expense, and hopefully that doesn't happen. And just, I'd say, keep an eye on it and an ear on it carefully, and quickly and definitively deal with it if it does happen.
Okay, Dalida?
One, I know, Commissioner, you mentioned that this has no cost, right? But I also...
Not a cost, board member. This didn't have any appropriation attached to it. So in other words, we don't have grants to provide districts.
Okay.
There's a cost to everything.
Yes. Thank you for that. And I heard from the comment earlier that, about the potential cost if the interpretation has to pass through someone verifying it, right? And I'm also thinking about the budget cuts that the districts are already facing. So just asking what, yeah, like what are the financial implications?
So I think maybe I would ask our Deputy Commissioner just to talk a little bit about the specifics around what we're saying in the regs and what we're also thinking already about the guidance around the machine translation, because I want to keep separating. There is formal, rights that students need to have with their IEPs, with multilingual plans that we all have to protect. That is a value statement that I hold very, very close. And then I also know from being in the field, we encourage a lot of communication to our families, and we encourage inclusiveness, right? That means multiple languages, including, we're talking in our website that we're going to be sharing things from the agency in, I think, 14 or 15 different languages, so, I mean, and even, by the way, that doesn't even cover all the languages in our state, right? But just to make sure that the most common languages in the state. So we're balancing that together, but I'll ask the Deputy to talk about specifically around the role of machine translation for general communication. Very different than IEPs, multilingual plans, especially for long-term multilingual students.
Yeah, so the change that we made specific to public comment feedback that we received for the machine translation is previously in the original version, we said that any written communication that was going to be machine translated would need to be reviewed by a trained translator. We heard a lot of feedback just about the impracticality and the expense that is associated with that. And so what we've done now in the updated regulations that are before you today is that we specified and we separated non-specialized settings. So a teacher sending out a notice to families about a parent-teacher conference or the school dance that's over on the weekend, like those types of non-specialized settings or notifications would now not need to be reviewed by a trained translator. Those can be machine translated and go out. Any type of specialized settings, so an IEP meeting, a discipline hearing, any notification with a legal context, those would have to be, if they are machine translated, the regulations require that they are reviewed by a trained interpreter. And so this is where we would specify in guidance what that review could look like and support the implementation of that review in order to be able to adjust to specific district contexts and provide them with recommendations and resources on how to complete that review. The requirement to provide interpretation and translation is not new because of this act going forward. However, we're trying to specify, a clearer way and a more practical way for districts to be able to complete those translations.
Thank you. My second question, more of a curiosity in terms of the two-tier interpretation qualification. So, for example, I'm originally from Cabo Verde, right? We speak, our official language is Portuguese. However, we speak Crioulo, and if you don't have access to education, you only speak Crioulo, which happens a lot of the cases of parents who migrate here. But the Creole is not an official language. And so I'm wondering, how do you define, and especially, and to make matters worse, we're 10 islands and we all have different dialects. And majority of the folks who migrate here is from Fogo, which almost seems like a different language to my dialect from my island, right? Like, so how would you go about, like, what is the sort of requirement for proficiency in a case like that?
Yeah, so any interpreter who's going to be standing into a meeting to do an interpretation needs to demonstrate that they're bilingual in both languages, English and the target language for what the family decides is their home language that they need to be translated. Interpreted. I think for low incidence languages, such as what you're describing, many districts rely on external vendors to be able to support them, or phone interpretation. We would require that those interpreters have gone through the training and this is really the onus is on the vendors now to make sure that their individuals who they're tapping to be school-based interpreters and contracts that districts engage in have gone through the training and become qualified interpreters now.
Thank you for this information. I think it's really informative. I'm curious, if this is approved today, what steps between now and next school year, where districts need to implement this, will be in place to provide districts enough support, because it is going to be a cost. And so, like, what should they be preparing, particularly because they're also going to be thinking about the graduation requirements.
Right,
So
right. Well, it's a good thing we're not starting from scratch, because actually some of the, what we find today in these regulations was actually started in 2018 when we had the School Interpreters Task Force that was formed through outside budget language and provided many of the recommendations that are now here today. Secretary Wright can speak to it because Holyoke Public Schools has implemented many of the recommendations that are here today in the regulations. And so we have already established training courses. We did receive some appropriation through ARPA funding at that time to be able to establish courses. We have to modify those courses to now match what these regulations are and what will be finally in place, but we do have a series of courses that staff members can take, that vendors can take, either through a train the trainer model and be able to run coursework if they become trained interpreters to again, train the trainer, or for interpreters or staff members to take the course on their own, either asynchronously or synchronously through the vendor that we have hired. We also have existing guidance that we're working to update now based on if these regulations are adopted today, to be clearer and more specific. And then we'll be supporting districts throughout. We're looking for sources of funding that we could potentially provide to be able to incentivize districts. We're also making modifications to the requirements in our statewide vendor list for interpreters and translators. So any of our external vendors who come in who want to be on our statewide contract, we would update the requirements for their qualification on that list to be able to be mirroring what's in our regulations as well.
and can you clarify if that training is free?
It is free. Obviously, we have provided districts with grant funding in the past to be able to stipend their staff to be able to participate in the training, whether it's through the school day or after school. But we do offer the training for free to districts. It's a cost to us, of course.
Vice Chair?
I just want to ask a follow-up to the answer that you gave to Kristen's question. So, may not agree. I don't necessarily have an automatic negative reaction to unfunded mandates. I mean, there are mandates that need to be implemented. In this case, there's a law, and it needs to be implemented whether it's funded or not. What I react to is a significant unfunded mandate where organizations don't have time to plan, think through trade-offs. I'm getting a lot of comfort from what you're saying. I just want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting. Would it be fair to say that based on what you know now, this is not like a binding question or a binding answer, you would be surprised if any district incurred significant additional costs for the beginning school year based on these regulatory changes? And I'm not even defining significant. I'm just like, what I'm hearing you say sounds entirely reasonable. I just want to make sure we're not, I want to understand if we're putting something in place that, it might be an unfunded mandate, and by the way, you got to do it in 3 months. And your example of Secretary Reich is helpful because, he was doing this in Holyoke years ago when he was there.
I will say, Maura, there's no way for us to know, so I want to just be clear. Like, we don't have a crystal ball to say. I will say this from my extensive experience in more than 20 plus years, always in districts with, I think in Chicago it was at least 100 languages that were spoken. The communication exists today. The rights of these children exist today. I think if this was something so brand new, we never ever translated anything, we never had these services, they exist today, and kudos to our districts. They're finding a way to do it with all the nuances that exist in our Commonwealth. I mean, there's a lot of nuances here, and it's not an easy lift. Trust me. There's nothing that hardens me more than I would go to schools to see like multiple languages. I mean, I love seeing that in a school, understanding the challenges that exist around, translation and interpretation. I think this is why, and I think this is, for me, this is why it's so important even from a values point, because you said something that was really critical. This will not be the last time that we are asked as an agency to implement something that's in the legislature that has no money, insufficient money, And frankly, a lot of political pressure exists for it, for different reasons, on both sides, by the way, on both sides. Not a value statement. That is the role of the agency, right? I get it, I embrace it. That complexity exists. I think it's important, board members, to call that out when we do see something like that. So I want to just say that we need to elevate that always, because we are the in-between. We are the in-between of the in terms of our field, and the implementers, and then the legislators, and that process, which again, still new to the role, still embracing it, because it's, again, I'm trying to really lean into it. So I think it's important for us to always have these conversations. I appreciate the fact you lifted it. Look, again, we don't pass regs and then leave them alone. We should be constantly looking at how these regs, how these guidelines are affecting the field, bringing that feedback back to you in a healthy loop. And by the way, all of you, because you all have constituents, you also provide, you're part of that feedback loop. And I can tell you right now, none of you are shy about being vocal with us, so, which I love. I'm just saying that as a compliment, including yourself, Member Hill. So I think we elevate that, but I just want to call that out. This is not going to be the last time, and this is why we had a wonderful conversation yesterday about the grad standards, right? Which is not even, we don't even have legislation yet. We don't even have regs yet. And there's more things coming. So I think it's more important than ever, and I say this as a service to, with all due respect to our administration, to our legislators, I've asked all of them, treat us as thought partners. Don't just treat us as like, here, go do this. Treat us as thought partners. We have valuable information to share because we are the in-between, and give us that respect. And please don't read anything into that, but just give us that respect, because we have no other interest than to make sure this is implemented well. And we have no other interest in the rights of these children is upheld, and we have no other interest that these children thrive. Otherwise, I don't know why we do any of this. So I just want to elevate that. So I think it's a great discussion, but I want to just elevate it to a higher level, because again, we don't have all the magic answers, but you have our commitment that as we start seeing the impact on the field, we will bring back that information. By the way, we'll also bring back information on the other side of, like, by the way, because we have concerns on the other side. We're not going far enough. And so if we are seeing that this is not being effective in protecting the rights of our children, we owe it to this board, we owe it to our community to bring that back to you as well.
Thank you.
This will be 60 seconds, but I think as we continue to have this conversation about what's mandated or regulated, like, it isn't a magic crystal ball, it's actually just doing the analysis. So if we know what each translator costs, we know how many schools we have, we could do a survey to figure out who has what. By the time this goes into implementation in advance of next budget year, you all should be able to say, here's the fiscal impact of this regulation. And then you should be able to go to the legislature and say, this is the investment that we need to ensure that our schools can come into compliance. That can be done every single time we're presented with something. So I think the exchange goes both ways. The legislature is always going to say, this should exist in our system. Then we should step back, or you all should step back and say, this is a great idea. This is how much this is the investment that we need to ensure that our schools are in compliance, that our districts are in compliance, and then hold them accountable for making the investment. Then we can step back and raise the question on how far schools can, like, we can't keep existing in this conversation where we say, oh, we just have to do it and our hands are tied. That's an insufficient framing of where we are. So you all have made marked progress. You've introduced this language. We are about to vote on it. By the time we get to the start of the school year, you will see in real time what is the impact of this. Then you can circle back and say, we actually need additional funds. And then it's up for the legislature to say if they will make the investment, stand behind this regulation or not. Then you actually have a scorecard on where are the investments being made up against the regulations being put forth in the school. Because there are resources. I think it is the role of the agency to guide the legislature toward the investments that they need to make.
Well, I think, Member Grant, I think, and this is a really good, as we think about our role as an agency, and again, it's still a relatively new leader, I do think it's a good challenge for us to say, on regs that we implement, when we see them in the process of implementation and we see resource constraints, because again, because sadly, and I'll just say this, in my experience this year, Very disappointing that so many things have been passed with no appropriations. So good intentions, but no appropriations, right? And we've had this conversation before. I won't revisit the other examples, and they're not going to stop. So I think it is, I think it's a healthy thing for us to do exactly what you just said, Member Grant. Every time we implement regulations, we should be having conversations at the right time of the year to say, how do we best help? Because again, I'm going to assume always best intentions. That we're trying to do, that we're Massachusetts. We're trying to raise the bar of excellence. We're trying to make sure our students are protected. So let's make sure, again, let's be those thought partners. And again, I'll ask the field, help us. Help us understand it. And again, we can dissect through, what the actual evidence says. Because again, it's not like these services aren't required now, right? I mean, the services are required now. And so, but again, there could be some unintended consequences. And I think it's a healthy thing for us to be asking and saying, okay, what does this mean for our rural communities who are already challenged? What does it mean for our largest schools that have so many different languages? What about the nuances? By the way, I joke about this. Cuban Spanish is very different than Mexican Spanish, FYI. If you heard the Secretary and I speak, we'd probably be speaking two different languages. I think it's just different. So again, there's these nuances that I think sometimes you can't really test until we start putting things in place. I do believe, though, board members, that we wouldn't bring this to you in this ring trying to balance both sides. So just my hope is that you see that. But you can also, you're calling out the right tensions because they do exist on both sides.
And it does go back to the implementability of anything. And so if this board, that's exactly why I always urge us to remember, we don't have the appropriations authority, never will and shouldn't. We do have the opportunity to say, hey, there's a cost to this.
Yeah, I mean,
But
the
on the
fiscal
other
impact
end,
statement every time.
but they know this most of the time.
Yeah,
I wrote
we-
fiscal impact
we did provide
statements.
that,
Yeah.
and we
Right,
still
I
did not
wrote
get
them
the
for the Ways and
appropriation.
Means Committee. So the
We
the
did do
real
the
thing is
analysis.
gonna be that it's how a district or how the state prioritizes its resources when it comes down to any of these things. And it's definitely, I'll give you an example, charter schools. When you vote on a charter school as a board member, we talk about this all the time, we're not looking at the impact on district finances because it was acknowledged in the legislature at the time of the charter school passage law that it's over and above, right? So there are some things that the board takes a vote on that we've been given as policy matters where it's just something we give to the districts. And we've been directed to do that in legislation because we're like the smoothing out body. And so I think there's like more of that than less of that, unfortunately. But it comes down to, a lot of different factors, like the Chapter 70 formula, where there are almost no strings attached other than accountability at the end through MCAS, which is now what we're discussing. And Kristen,
I just want to mention that in addition to the financial implications, I think that there's real capacity issues, because I recall times where we've had meetings or situations where we needed translation in rural communities, and there's literally no one available to translate. So I want to make sure that when we pass something, that it is possible for folks to implement, not just financially, but also capacity-wise. So I appreciate that we have a year to figure it out, because we're going to need to shift some things around to make sure that schools have the ability to implement money-wise and capacity-wise.
I look at this in the same way as like nursing, educating
Right.
nursing. There's no nursing, there's a shortage of nursing teachers, right? So how do you create something where there's no capacity? And so the commissioner's saying, well, there's vendors that do this, and I think it's great, to your point, Dr. Grant, like, we gotta get back to the legislature and say, how implementable are some of these things
Because
over
then the
time?
language reflects like no investment, right? So in service to the districts, you could have had a set of regulations that are like, well, we have to be staggered in the way that this is implemented because we don't have an investment. And so when you circle back and share with us, the following districts are out of compliance, or it has to be grounded in the realities of the investments that were made at the time that the regulation was passed. But you have to continue to engage in that dialogue.
Yes.
And you have a runway to get ready for the next budget cycle.
Mary Ann?
Thank you. I really appreciate this dialogue. It's really very helpful, but I still have a couple of, rudimentary questions. I just want to level set. When you say, what is a machine service?
So using AI, using a tool, a Google Translate, but something where you can put the English or the target
Okay.
language in, and it translates it. back
Okay,
to you.
gotcha. So if you go back to, slide 6, And the third bullet, my understanding then is that the translator review comes after the machine has been implemented?
Correct, so you
Is
take-
that cool for special education? I mean, we just passed a whole thing in response to this for special education, so
So
are these, I'm sorry
Yep.
to interrupt yet, but are we universally using closed loop machine services or AI services so that they're not gonna have an unintended consequence by having access to the IEPs?
So I think, Member Stewart, this is where I was saying earlier about, and again, asking for grace, still leaning into the role. There's the law, there's our regs, and then there's guidance.
Okay.
And where I want to really reserve best practices, especially is in the guidance. So I think we can lift up, districts that are using machine translators that are high quality, that are ethical, that are, and so those are things that.
Quality.
Yeah, so I mean, those are
I said
things.
maintain confidentiality.
So those are things that we'll lift up in the guidance. So that way, again, we're clear, and because things can change very quickly, we also have the ability then to pivot on the guidance as well when we see, changes happening.
So you're not at all concerned about using these kinds of services in these special education situations or any other specialty situation? This is fine?
I think we would provide guidance. I mean, there are other laws and regulations and statutes that sort of guard student records and confidentiality, and how student records are transferred. And so we would rely on those in addition to what we put out in guidance to protect student records.
Because it would be terrible if a district with no funding available, relied on machine services, and I just that's what I'm thinking of. So I just want to
in the regulations for important documents like IEPs or documents around the special education setting, those documents would have to be reviewed by a trained translator following the machine translation to make sure that they're accurate.
Are there shared specialists who are doing this in districts where there aren't, specifically dedicated? Is that how it works? Is there somebody who is, responding in multiple districts to be that advanced educator, interpreter, so they could review the machine?
Yeah, I think districts have multiple systems depending on their size, depending on their context for how they do this. I mean, it's already required that the IEP is translated. I think it's within 10 days following the IEP meeting that the IEP is translated in the home language for the parent. And so now this allows for, machine translation may already be in use in these districts, but now this requires the use of review and editing following that machine translation.
Yeah, I guess, we need to do something around, to bring everybody on the same page, I feel, around so-called machine services, AI in schools, that really is locked in for the specific purpose of education, whatever use it's going to be, because we're not building some, Discord server for the tech bros. We're over here trying to, help every student and every family in every community access what they need to really support their child and their students in their community. So this is very concerning. In terms of a whole rollout, I understand what you're saying, Commissioner, in terms of, this has been going on for years, this isn't new, but AI is new. And, I know that everything I read is like, it's happening, it's done, there's nothing you can do about it, you're gonna take it, you're just gonna implement, it's gonna happen, we're gonna use it, as if there's no choice anywhere. And so I just wanna make sure that, in response to our unanimously approved amendment to the, regulation on special education, that we're being really sensitive and cautious. I would be more cautious than just rolling it all out to
So Member
everybody.
Stewart, just to be clear, and again, team, correct me if I'm wrong on this, there's nothing that you're approving today that's saying, change what you're doing with IEPs, use technology, districts are using more technology today, but I will tell you when it comes to IEPs, at least in my experience, and I'm pretty sure Secretary in your experience, staff are very protective. They're very protective because, you know, the complexities of IEPs, the comprehensiveness of IEPs. And so again, you know, again, that exists today. So these regs are not changing or encouraging that in any different way. In fact, what we're doing is putting more guardrails to make sure that when it comes to different languages, to make sure that they're accurate, because these are very important documents and it does affect the rights of our children. So in my opinion, we're actually strengthening today's practices, you know, more than anything else. Again, there could be a whole different conversation of the role of technology in IEPs, but these regs are not impacting that in any sort of negative way. In fact, if anything, we're putting guardrails on it.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here from somebody who's lived this the last, 8 years. I get that this could be a stretch for some districts, and in my new capacity, I will certainly be advocating for more resources. I will say these guidelines are more helpful in terms of providing guidance and clarity. This was already an expectation for districts to be doing. I think this is very helpful when I read these in terms of providing more direction. I look forward to seeing the guidance that accompanies it, because I think it can help clarify for people. I will say that the department has a ton of resources for districts to utilize. There's now a lot more expertise than we ever had before. There was tremendous urgency. There still is urgency, to what the commissioner had said before, for families to get what they need to get this information, especially highly sensitive, high-level documents in their native language. And to me, there isn't an option to wait. I understand that I do understand that for some districts, like anything, people are in different places. Again, I do think compared to where the department was 5 years ago, 8 years ago, there's a lot more expertise, resources. The training is excellent that they offer. I will say, I do think it's doable. I'm happy to offer my thought partnership and support, because there are creative ways to do this and utilize folks that are already in the district to believe on implementation. There are ways to do this that meet the needs of families that also districts have the ability. Districts are doing a lot already for kids. I want to be clear about that. And there are more resources. There's also technology. I understand there's questions about the use of AI and so forth. But there is the services that are out there are also much more readily available, more cost effective. And districts are already spending resources on those things now. But again, I do think our role and the department's role is to help be a thought partner with districts in order to make sure this is implemented well.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're getting to the point of a motion on the technically amended version.
Yes, the one you have in front of you.
So I hear a motion, a second,
Second.
and then a roll call.
Okay, Member Chamberlain?
That's right.
Member Fisher?
Yes.
Member Grant?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed?
Yes.
Member Hasha?
Aye.
Member Smitty?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Aye.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
Secretary Reich?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks, Deb and Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a report on conditions imposed on Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School and recommended action.
Thank you, Chair. So our next agenda item concerns the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School and the conditions previously imposed on the school's charter by the board. Over the past year, the department has monitored the school's progress in addressing concerns related to the governance and board operations. Board members have a memo on that work and the school's response to the board's conditions. Based on the progress that has been made, I'm recommending that the board remove the existing conditions and replace them, though, with a new condition designed to support and continued improvement and accountability. Again, board members, these will be conditions from the commissioner, which again allows us to refine them, to adjust them. And so today's discussion will provide an opportunity to review the school's progress and consider the department's recommendation. I welcome to the table Allison Bagg, the Associate Commissioner of Charter Schools and School Redesign, Alyssa Hopkins, the Associate Commissioner, and I believe potentially Lauren also might also join us on this one as well. But we'll start with Allison and with Alyssa. Alyssa.
So, as you can see in the memo, the Commissioner's recommendation to the Board reflects the evidence that the Board of Trustees of the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School has completed the tasks described in the 3 conditions imposed by the Board in February 2025. The purpose of the original conditions was to require specific actions by the Board, including self-assessment, governance training, open meeting law training, and transportation planning. The Board completed those required actions and therefore satisfied or sufficiently met those conditions. However, completion of the required activities is different from demonstrating sustained improvement in governance practices. The new condition ensures that the Board of Trustees understands that additional evidence is needed to establish that the Board of Trustees operates in a manner consistent with the governance expectations that are detailed in the charter school performance criteria. The school will submit its renewal application this summer, will undergo a renewal inspection with a third-party evaluator this fall, and then the Commissioner will review the body of evidence this winter, both related to a renewal decision as well as whether or not the Board of Trustees has met the requirements of this proposed new condition. We're here to answer any questions.
Alyssa, can you, because I got a few board members that asked me about this.
Sure.
Can you, if you look at condition 3 around the transportation, because there's, even I was trying to understand the board members, there's the governance action of the board and the actual implementation of the actual plan. So I want to make sure that, those two things can get a little bit confusing in terms of, the condition that was put in and then both the technical and sort of the substantive components of that. Because, so if you can just talk just a little bit about just condition 3, because I got questions from some of the board members on that.
Sure, absolutely. So condition number 3 was around the planning for transportation. So if you look specifically at that language, it was the development and submission of a plan for transportation that would be eligible for regional reimbursement. And the expectation that the Board of Trustees reviewed historical patterns for the school in order to develop that plan for transportation. They did indeed develop a plan that is eligible for regional reimbursement. They, based upon several different factors, which we can talk about, they are not electing to implement that plan, but the condition was about the board performing its due diligence to determine what would be a plan eligible for regional reimbursement and the potential logistical components of implementation. Regional charter schools in Massachusetts are not required by state law to implement regional transportation. And there are a number of factors that influence whether or not a regional charter school decides to implement what we would call a universal regional transportation service for students. This school does provide regional transportation. It has 4 different routes outside of its district of location, and it also provides no-fee transportation to low-income students who reside within the charter schools region.
So just to be clear, the condition was for them to develop a plan. They didn't fully implement the plan, which is a little confusing, right? But they do have a current plan for transportation for this. So again, it's the technical pieces, board members, that I just want to make sure that you understand. So again, this is why we got questions on this particular item, Chair.
So to clarify, the condition was that the Board of Trustees develop a plan, but the description describes that the Board of Trustees delegated the completion of the plan to the board chair, but then never discussed the plan, correct? After it was developed.
So the written plan was not discussed at the December meeting, but there were meetings prior to the December meeting where there was a lengthy presentation related to a regional transportation service that was eligible for regional reimbursement, and a very lengthy board discussion related to that plan.
Did they share the plan with you all?
So the plan was submitted to the department by the December 31st deadline.
Okay.
So yes.
So again, there's these technical differences. Again, this is why you can see it's a little confusing.
But the board never,
Right.
but the board never discussed the plan that was submitted.
And did they vote on approving it even though it wasn't implemented?
So they discussed the plan, the development of the plan, at an earlier meeting before the December meeting, so at the October meeting, but they all just discussed it at the December meeting.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The board did discuss the plan at 2 different board meetings.
But that's not what it says in the report. That's why I'm glad
Sure.
that we're having this
The
discussion.
written plan was not submitted to the board at the December meeting, but the board did discuss the plan at 2 different board meetings.
And so, board members, this is a good example where, so again, you can see the technical pieces of it, and unfortunately, again, when we get into these things get very technical. One of the suggestions, that I would put for everybody is that, again, this is why it's also great to have commissioner conditions, because I can get very granular and really get real specific to what the actual issue we're trying to address, which in this case, it's really making sure that we have access, right, for students to transportation, right? Because this school has very strong academics, very strong school performance, very popular. So just to put that in the context. And so I think, I definitely hear the concern, and I can hear the concern that the board had when they put this condition on there. They did technically meet it because they discussed it prior to December. So again, it gets into the technical language. But again, for me, I feel when I think about what the substance of it is, there's still more work to do. I feel like in some of these concerns, and that's where, again, I can implement further conditions at my level, which again allows us not only to go very granular, but also with that comes a lot of monitoring, because they have to report back to us on how they're making progress on these conditions, and it allows us to pivot. And again, we'll always provide you updates, board members, as we're seeing some of these conditions.
I mean, I guess unfortunately, I was an authorizer twice, and I'm either confused at the language of the condition or evidence that they met the condition. So I don't know how the condition can be removed. Was the expectation for them to submit a plan that the board approved, and then they have the discretion to not implement the plan? Or was the expectation for them to create a plan that was just discussed generally? And I'm assuming the condition was set because there's a concern around students being able to have access to transportation. So if they chose not to implement this plan, how did they remedy students' transportation needs at the school? So I don't know how you remove a condition. Like I'm just like outside of these pages, I was trying to put together how did we end up with this condition being set? And this wasn't my concern. My actual concern was around governance, because based on what was written, I don't know that they met condition 1 at all, because they appointed new board members after the deadline. So did those board members get access to the training that was required as well? So I don't find myself in a position to say they've met these conditions, but if there's additional information that's outside of this, I'd like to see it.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Did you want to answer, or because I have a
Well,
follow-up question to what?
You can go again. You can go ahead, and then we'll.
If you think of Christina's question, has the condition technically been met, but in retrospect, perhaps the condition should have been a little bit more than develop a plan? And I'm not trying to say, why didn't you do it? I'm trying to say, a reasonable person might kind of infer what it means to develop a plan, not like, great, here's the plan, now I'm, on my way. If that's the answer, and I'm not going back in time, but does it make sense to have them, for department approval, develop and implement or not implement, but you have to sign off on it? Because it's kind of meaningless to just say, develop something if it's up to someone to decide whether to implement. I don't mind it being up to the school whether to implement, but if it's a condition, presumably you didn't just want them to develop a plan and decide not to do it. So what's going on here?
So, to specifically focus on the transportation plan itself, right? So, what was submitted, the written report, did reflect the board conversations that took place at board meetings both in October and December. So I do want to make that clear. The written report was reflective of the information that had been shared with the board at its board's meetings by school staff. So the plan itself did reflect what the board's understanding was in terms of the implementation of this transportation plan. I think in addition to that, yes, there is always a certain degree of hindsight in terms of the word choice within a condition. Condition 3 specifically talks just about the submission of the plan with no expectation that that plan would be implemented. Again, for a regional charter school, particularly one of this size, it is a very different conversation for the commissioner to consider and for the board to consider requiring a charter school to implement a transportation service without the additional information of the budget, financial considerations, operational considerations for implementing transportation. The purpose of this original condition, if we go back to February 2025, was to require the Board of Trustees and its school staff who report to the Board of Trustees to perform a transparent and public process related to the discussion of transportation, so that the board would engage in a discussion about transportation and a transportation service that would be eligible for reimbursement from the state, which would mean that all students who would be interested in receiving transportation services would in fact receive it. So it is that consideration of a universal access to transportation. That is what happened. The board did have these discussions and they submitted a plan that's eligible for reimbursement. It could be a future consideration of both the commissioner and this board to take additional actions related to transportation. That is absolutely something that could be considered by this board at a future date, or as the commissioner has already described, something that would be within his purview to consider.
So as we
May I ask a
Yes.
clarifying question and then a comment? The clarifying question, does the school have a transportation strategy? It's just not one that meets the universal requirements to make it eligible for regional transportation? Because my recollection is that they said we have a more focused strategy, which involves providing bus services from particular communities, and they argue that this has allowed them to attract a roughly representative population compared to their sending districts.
That is correct.
Okay. So that was my clarifying question. And then my comment is, it seems to me that what's going on here is that they seem to have met the letter of the law with respect to these 3 conditions that we placed on them. And I think we're having a conversation about whether they've met the spirit of the law. And the new condition that's being imposed strikes me as an attempt to capture the spirit of the law. It's broader and about the sort of quality of the overall governance. And I have somewhat mixed feelings about it because it's not clear to me why we wouldn't look at that purely through the vehicle of the charter renewal process when they come up in 2027. It feels like a bit of micromanaging midway, which in general I don't think we should be doing for charters, but I know there's a history and a context here, and so I'm inclined to defer to the commissioner and the office's recommendation if that's the right way forward. But it seems very close to me, given that it explicitly refers to the charter school performance framework that's used for renewal decisions. We're sort of just saying we're going to be looking at this in the renewal process, and so get ahead of it. And so maybe that's sending a signal. So anyways, I'm inclined to accept your recommendation for that reason.
I just want to add a point of clarification. So my concern about how the condition is written is that the board approved, or the board submitted a plan, and it's my interpretation that if the board doesn't approve the plan, then I don't think that that condition is met. So I understand that there's some folks that say that they did meet the condition in the spirit of it, but it's my interpretation that they did not, if the board never approved a plan before it was submitted.
I
So
mean,
that's just my,
It literally
It just
says the
submit
board.
a plan. It doesn't say a board-approved plan.
it says the board will submit a plan.
And they did.
They did.
And they did.
I
They
mean,
sent it to us.
But then in the
just a
conditions
narrow-
section, it says the board did not review and approve the transportation plan prior to submitting it to the department.
They didn't review and approve it. They didn't approve it, but they reviewed it.
So I just want to.
I think the nuance is in the way the condition was said.
Yeah, I think the
agree
condition
with
was
you on
written
that. I think it's
in
a
a way that
poorly
allows
written
them to
condition.
argue that they met the letter of the law. So
I want to clarify.
why do you want to get in a fight about that?
Yeah.
I want to
I wanna make
clarify what
two-
Alyssa
two-
stated about
sorry.
this technical point. The board reviewed, discussed the plan, and voted to delegate the final completion of the plan to the board chair, as charter schools do often with technical details related to an amendment request or something that the department is seeking. So it was a discussed plan. The board voted on the plan, voted to delegate the final completion to the board chair. We consider that a vote of approval by the Board of Trustees.
That is not written here, but okay.
I want to just make a comment about this conversation, and I'm kind of in agreement with kind of your comment about where you would defer at this point. But there's a part of me that feels like the fact that we're having this conversation is kind of ridiculous. And I don't mean ridiculous that you all or we are saying things we shouldn't be saying. I'm saying, like, with all the debates we've had on this board and on the time I've been here about charter schools, this type of the discussion has never taken place. And if I was on the board of an organization watching this discussion play out, I would say, we might want to think about whether we're inviting problems or whether we could otherwise avoid them. And I'm not prejudging a renewal or something, but this is like I get it. They've complied, I understand that, but you gotta look at this and say, why are we even having this conversation? And that's kind of where my head is at. Now, fortunately, there's a renewal coming up soon, and you'll deal with what you want to deal with then. But just be super clear in whatever conditions, if you do place conditions in a recommendation, as to the authority that you as commissioner will have, and like put it in the motion so there's no discussion about whether you have, like, I'm saying they have to provide evidence of board governance consistent with, this is all in the motion. Okay, who determines whether they're providing the evidence consistent with da-da-da-da-da? If you think it's not, do you get to come back to us and say they are not providing the evidence, or the fact that they're providing evidence that's consistent is meeting the terms of the?
Yeah, so again, as I understand these processes, again, these are conditions that the board set back in February 25. We can debate the language, intentions, right? Our team, is looking at the actions and feels with reasonable confidence that they met the conditions at this technical level. If that was the end of the conversation, shame on us. But the conversation is like, no, we're still very concerned about other issues, specifically in governance. We're still concerned about what's going to happen with this plan that, even though they have transportation, what's going to happen beyond that. So having the conditions at the commissioner level, not only do I have the authority, Member Hill, but also I have the authority and the ability to follow up through our team and monitor, get the evidence that I need, and then I always provide you updates on these charters anyways. And as Member West stated, they're up for renewal in a year. And just to be clear on the record, our intention is not to undermine or trying to hurt their chance of renewal. Is to just make sure we have accountability, and to make sure that, and if anything, really we want them to have a strong renewal, right? I mean, that's the goal, right? And so again, all these efforts are going to be in that spirit. I want to just call that out, but we have to. It is our role to hold them accountable. It is our role to make sure that if there's governance issues, other challenges in terms of serving the children, that we're calling that out. We just believe that we'll be effective doing it at my level, with, again, updates to the board, as we're seeing progress or lack of, because again, what you're gonna have to prove the actual renewal, which is a much bigger deal. That is a much more extensive process. And frankly, the reason we're having this conversation is to be fair, to say, technically you met these conditions. There are other concerns. By the way, you have a renewal coming up. All this is gonna come up as part of the renewal.
So with that having been said, do we have a motion to pass this?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, in a second, and then a roll call.
Okay, Member Chamberlain? Member Fisher?
Yes.
Member Grant?
No.
Vice Chair Hills?
Yes.
Member Mohammed had to drop off. Member Husha?
Aye.
Member Smitty?
No.
Member Stewart?
No.
Member West?
Yes.
Chair Craven?
Yes.
Secretary Reich?
Yes.
The votes, 7 to 3, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also, Helene, if you want to stay there just for the next topic.
Sure.
I also appreciate the need for the precision, because February 2025 was a long time ago in dogs' ages here. So I think it's good, Commissioner, to heed the precision with which Member Smitty and Member Grant were articulating for future.
You just have to appreciate that many of us have not sat on this board the entire time.
Right.
So it is not a lost effort to actually put out a narrative of the school. When was it founded? When were these conditions put in place? Why are they before us today as opposed to a year ago when they were due? Map that out for us so that we can make an informed vote. On principle, they could have met the conditions. I just am not sure that they did, because I don't have enough information.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you
That's a
for
good
that
point.
feedback.
And our last item is the agenda for next year, the meeting schedule. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Okay.
And we don't need a roll call.
We don't? It says I do.
I have a clarifying question.
It says we do.
But Farzan is not on.
Oh,
There are
Thank you.
3 meetings where it's noted that there will be no special meeting. It's sort of explicitly noted. And then the rest, it lists the Mondays as well. Is that a commitment to using those, or is that
not necessarily a
Okay.
commitment, but it's a
just say,
opening.
keep it open?
Keep it
Okay.
open.
Thank you.
Anything, Helene? Anything? Were you going to say something? No. Okay.
Nope, all set.
Sorry.
And I have nothing to add except a board retreat is missing from this. And so just
Oh, yeah.
flagging that we
Good.
should note at some point
Yes.
that we're going to come together outside of this schedule. Sorry,
Thank you.
love you.
Great point. And also, when I ask us to adjourn today in memory of Henry Thomas of Springfield, the former head of the Urban League, who recently passed away, and he was a member of this board. He was also the chairman of the board of UMass when I worked there, but just a great person in education generally, and somebody that we should remember their service to this board. So I hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
So moved.
Oh, wait, we
Oh,
need
wait.
to vote on the schedule.
Oh, the schedule.
A motion to vote
No,
on
we
the
don't
schedule.
need to, oh,
Rhoda to the end.
Yes.
we don't need a roll call. Okay, a vote on the schedule. Do I hear a motion? Yes?
Well, I'll move it.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Got it. And then a motion to adjourn in honor of Henry Thomas, memory of.
Yeah.
We are adjourned. Thank you.